Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclast, the podcast. I'm your host, Michael Lucht, and I am sick as a fucking dog. Feel like shit? Sure seen this coming. But it informs today's episode. I apologize ahead of time. My voice sounds... Hell! I don't know. Glurgluggly. So yeah, my bad. But plague is all around us. But this does inform today's topic. Today, we are going to delve into the fucked up history of ancient medicine, specifically an aspect of medicine throughout the ages that still persists to this day. It's a little something called medicinal cannibalism. I guess today they would call it biopharmaceutical harvesting. Oh, what a pretty little frock to put on the name. No, we're gonna get into some ancient medicine, some not so ancient medicine. We're gonna get into some traditional Chinese medicine. We're gonna get into some Hollywood, USA, cosmetic trends, etc., and some not too long ago crimes, glurgluggly, that essentially fall under the umbrella of medicinal cannibalism. So I guess this episode will kind of veer slightly into the realm of occult crime atlas, just a little bit, just a tad, but we'll save that for the very end. So before we jump into everything, as always, welcome to the show. If you've never been here before, I am your host, once again, Michael Lucht. This is Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts. If this is your first time here, glurgluggly, no, you poor thing. No, welcome. Thank you for likes and subscribes and listens and all that hammering. That's not a word. No, what we do here is we like to discuss weird shit, mostly just weird things, all kinds of weird stuff, weird history, weird people mostly. It's largely biographies, but I've been trying to branch out and not limit myself to biographies. So we will discuss strange topics here and there. But as I've been studiously researching in the background, despite my current health predicament, I've been looking into Soviet and communist China research into parapsychology. They don't call it that. Well, the Soviets don't, at least. They call it psychotronics. The Communist Party of China, the ruling government, it's weirder there. It's much weirder. But I'm still in the middle of researching a lot of this stuff. Oh boy. I'm just trying. I want to make sure that I give the most full and detailed account that I could, or can, excuse me, in the future going forward when I make the episode. Yes, I wanted to make sure that I've got the most accurate information and the most thorough information, so I'm still working on it. It will be soon, but as I've been looking into many of the related topics to this, I stumbled across some stuff that, once again, hey, you heard it up top, medicinal cannibalism. We'll get into it. But first, before we jump into everything else, let's hear a word from our sponsors. You know, hangovers are no fun. Unless you're some kind of masochist, I don't know. But hey, whatever tickles your pickle, all right? That's up to you. That's between you and whatever deity you beg forgiveness from. But you know what? Hangovers, we're a thing of the past now. You know why? Because now there's liqueur. L-I L-I-Q-U-R-E. Liqueur. Liqueur gummies combine DHM, milk thistle, B vitamins, and ginger root to help your body recover after drinking. They fight fatigue, nausea, and dehydration, so you wake up feeling refreshed. Try them for faster recovery and enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code ICON, I-C-O-N, at liqueur.com for 20% off anything. You know, life isn't easy. Sometimes you need a little something to calm down. But sometimes you're at work or school or hanging around some square who's probably giving you a guff. Well, guess what? There's Shimmerwood beverages. Shimmerwood's award-winning CBD seltzers combine full-spectrum CBD with natural fruit shrubs, delivering refreshing, stress-relieving drinks that ease tension and promote relaxation. Enjoy an exclusive discount with my promo code ICON, I-C-O-N, at shimmerwood.com for 30% off any product, exclusively through Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts. Thank you. The following is an unsolicited opinion / public service announcement from Kooks, Cranks, and Iconoclasts, the podcast. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, there's been a lot of talk lately about who said this or who did what and whose opinion is valid or where free speech lies in the outer limits of the Twilight Zone. It's coming up a lot lately. But there's something you need to realize, ladies and gentlemen. That is that if you live within these United States, you're going to have to come to grips with the fact that sooner or later, you will be shot. It doesn't matter what your politics are, your beliefs, your lifestyle. You're gonna get shot. It's gonna happen. Better get used to it. Because this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it'll always be. Play ball! Glurgluggly. So, I don't know if you could tell from the opening music that I put together at the beginning of this episode, but that was meant to convey the battle between a sickness, a virus, or a bacteria, if you will, and the body's immune systems in the gladiatorial arena of our bodies. Well, those are the white blood cells, etc., in the audience, whatnot. So, medicinal cannibalism. Let's talk about it. This is a horrendous compendium of some of the weirdest shit that I've ever stumbled across. Now, I'm gonna, for the sake of full disclosure, a lot of this is going to be lifted from various Wikipedia articles because, as I said, I felt like shit all week. But I'm here to entertain you nonetheless. So let's jump into it. Medical or medicinal cannibalism is the consumption of parts of the human body, dead or alive, to treat or prevent diseases. The medical trade and pharmacological use of human body parts and fluids often arose from the belief that because the human body is able to heal itself, it can also help heal another human body. Makes sense in a primitive kind of way. Much of medical cannibalism applied the principles of sympathetic magic. Got a drippy dong? Eat a dry dong. You understand. For example, that powdered blood helps bleeding, human fat helps bruising, and powdered skulls help with migraines or dizziness. Medical cannibalism has been documented especially in Europe and China. In Europe, thousands of Egyptian mummies were ground up and sold as medicines since powdered human mummy, called mumia, not that one, was thought to stop internal bleeding and to have other healing properties. Reaching its peak in the 16th century, the practice continued, in a few cases, until the early 20th century. Fresh human blood, particularly from recently executed criminals, was also highly valued because of its supposed healing powers, a custom that goes back to ancient Rome, where the blood of wounded gladiators was thought to cure epilepsy. Weird. In China, the consumption of human flesh as a medical treatment dates back to at least the Tang Dynasty, approximately 618 to 907 Common Era, when it was endorsed by medical texts like the Bencao Shi Yi. In hundreds of documented cases, young individuals, often women, voluntarily cut flesh from their bodies to feed their ill parents or parents-in-law. Later medical manuals, gotta really like those in-laws, huh? Later medical manuals like the Bencao Gangmu, which we'll delve deeper into later, my goodness, advised against the use of human body parts, though still acknowledging their use in treating diseases. Basically, it's like only fools would use these bodily parts and fluids to cure diseases. By the way, here's a list of bodily fluids and parts that cure diseases. During the Cultural Revolution, cannibalism resurged in the context of political and social upheaval, with instances of individuals consuming the organs of perceived quote-unquote class enemies under the belief that they had healing properties. In the mid-1990s, journalists uncovered an underground market in aborted fetuses in China and Hong Kong, and more than 17,000 pills supposedly filled with the powdered flesh of fetuses or stillborns were seized by South Korean customs officials in 2011-2012. If one includes the drinking of human blood in one's understanding of quote-unquote cannibalism, which the ancient Romans themselves would not have done, then medical cannibalism in Europe can be traced back to ancient Rome, where the blood of wounded gladiators was sometimes drunk out of a belief it cured epilepsy, as stated before. So medical cannibalism in Europe reached its peak in the 16th century, with the practice becoming widespread in Germany, France, Italy, and England. At that time, most quote-unquote raw materials for the practice came from mummies stolen from Egyptian tombs. No wonder they're fucking cursing everybody all the time. Additionally, skulls were taken from Irish burial sites, and grave diggers sometimes robbed and sold body parts. Gotta make a living. Medicines were created from human bones, blood, and fat, and believed to treat many types of illnesses. Tinctures to treat internal bleeding were made by soaking mummified bodies in alcohol or vinegar. Powdered skull was used to treat ailments of the head, and was sometimes mixed with chocolate to treat apoplexy. That would be, in the medical sense, non-responsiveness. You knock the fuck out. In the early 19th century, Englishmen still treated epilepsy by mixing skull with molasses. Oh, molasses. As such, practices became more common. The principle that like cures like was used to determine the treatment for various ailments. For example, parts of the head were used to treat issues relating to the head, and eyes of dead people were collected and used for ophthalmological issues. Blood, specifically, soon evolved to be seen as a substantial elixir, especially fresh, warm human blood, because it was believed to still possess the soul of the deceased. Obviously. For example, it was believed that drinking the blood of a strong person or a wise person would result in an increase of strength or wisdom. I mean, pretty much every culture has some form of, if I eat this, then I will gain its soul, etc. The blood of a strong person or the blood of a wise person grants strength or wisdom, respectively, because once ingested, the spirit of the deceased connected with that of the consumer and lends them its power. This belief was especially common in Germany. Even the poor, who could not afford other remedies, took part in this practice by bringing a cup to executions, paying the executioner a small fee, then filling their cup with the fresh blood of the executed criminal. The execution of criminals was seen as having a double advantage. Alive, they were a burden on the nation, but their dead bodies had the power to serve a public good by improving the health of others. Maybe we should bring this back. Europeans also adopted a belief they considered to be of ancient Egyptian origin, namely that the more valuable corpses were those of young individuals, especially those that had died a brutal, sudden death, for it was believed that the spirit would remain trapped within the body for a longer period of time and thus have greater healing powers. So, probably a lot of young people were brutally murdered in order to preserve their delicious, delicious blood. Now, back in China, the consumption of human flesh was considered a highly effective medical treatment, at least since the Tang Dynasty, as mentioned before, 618, 907 Common Era. It was recommended by the Benkao Shiyi, an influential medical reference book published in the early 8th century, as well as in similar later manuals, together with the ethical ideal of filial piety, honor your ancestors, according to which young people were supposed to do everything in their power to support their parents and parents-in-law. This idea led to a unique form of voluntary cannibalism in which a young person cut some of the flesh out of their body and gave it to an ill parent or parent-in-law for consumption. The majority of these donors were women, go figure, frequently daughters-in-law of the patient. The devoted daughter-in-law would tie her thigh or her arm very tightly with a piece of clothing. She would then use a very sharp knife to quickly slice off a piece from her upper arm or upper thigh. The flesh would immediately be mixed in with soup or gruel, cruel gruel, which had been heated in preparation, and this would then be offered to the dying mother-in-law or father-in-law. The official dynastic histories describe more than 110 cases of such voluntary offerings that took place between the early 7th and early 20th centuries. That's right, 1900s, not too long ago. There were still occasional cases in the 1970s and 1980s, according to newspaper reports. The body parts cut most often were in this order: thighs, upper arms, and livers. Ow! While most of the donors were young adults or possibly teenagers, some were girls or less commonly boys aged from 7 to 12. While these acts were, at least nominally, voluntary, and the donors usually, though not always, survived them, several sources also report of children and adolescents who were killed so that their flesh could be eaten for medical purposes. According to some sources, eating the boiled heart of a child was considered a good way of extending one's own life, especially if regularly repeated. Maybe that's what I need to do to get over this sickness. Though inevitably deadly for the donor, obviously. Emperor Wuzong of Tang supposedly ordered provincial officials to send him, quote, the hearts and livers of 15-year-old boys and girls, unquote, when he had become seriously ill, hoping in vain this medicine would cure him. Later, private individuals sometimes followed his example, paying soldiers who kidnapped preteen children for their kitchen. In later times, medical manuals took a more ambivalent stance towards the use of human flesh. You can eat human flesh or whatever. It's either way, take it or leave it. The influential Benkao Gangmu, first published in the late 16th century, advises in its introduction against the use of human body parts for medicine, but in its main part, it nevertheless covers 35 different parts or organs of the human body considered to be a good cure for certain diseases, among them human flesh, whose consumption was said to cure tuberculosis, and blood, which is probably cures all that ails you. During the Cultural Revolution, circa 1966 to 1976, hundreds of incidents of cannibalism occurred, mostly motivated by hatred against supposed class enemies, quote unquote. However, health concerns sometimes played a role as well, as the writer Zhang Yi observed. In a case recorded by the local authorities, a school teacher in Mengshan County, quote, heard that consuming a beauty's heart could cure disease, unquote. He then chose a 13 or 14-year-old student of his and publicly denounced her as a member of the enemy faction, which was enough to get her killed by an angry mob, and after the others had left, he cut open the girl's chest, dug out her heart, and took it home to enjoy. I assume, enjoy as a meal. I would hope this is bad enough already. I hope there's nothing else going on there. Moving on. Another teacher from Kangwoo County had been present when the vice principal of his school was killed and consumed on the school premises. Boy, that's a field day, isn't it? Remember field day? He used to kill the principal and eat his body. The pupils and teachers alike were involved. He admitted having joined in the feast after one of his students, quote, held up a piece of dried human flesh the size of a finger and said to me, "You have chronic stomach problems. This is good for you. Thus, I also ate the flesh," unquote. In a further case that took place in Wuzhuan County, likewise in the Guangxi region, 3 brothers were beaten to death as supposed enemies. Afterwards, their livers were cut out, baked, and consumed as quote-unquote medicine. In the mid-1990s, Hong Kong journalists exposed an underground market in human fetuses in both mainland China and Hong Kong. Traders connected to hospitals sold aborted fetuses for consumption, charging up to $300 apiece, and promising, quote-unquote, all sorts of medical benefits, from rejuvenation to a cure for asthma. How about that? While recovering from an accident, the director, Fruit Chan, this is a film director, was repeatedly served in quote-unquote exceptional soup by his doctor, finding out only later that it was quote-unquote made of fetus. Chan and the screenwriter Lillian Lee believe that they also unknowingly ate such soup while researching in hospitals for their movie Dumplings, which was released in 2004 and features this custom. In 2011/2012, more than 17,000 capsule pills purported to be filled with the powdered flesh of human fetuses or stillborns and, quote, touted for increasing vitality and sex drive, were seized by South Korean customs officials from ethnic Koreans living in China, who had tried to bring them into South Korea to consume the capsules themselves or distribute them to others. Some experts later suggested that the pills may actually have been made of human placenta, as placentophagy, as it's called, when you eat placenta, is a legal and relatively widespread practice in China. Apparently, this still goes on today in lots of places, including Hollywoodland, USA. More on that later. In Europe, the human blood was normally drunk warm and fresh for increased effectiveness, but some people prefer to have it cooked. Therefore, a recipe for turning blood into marmalade was invented. How whimsical. In 1679, a Franciscan apothecary suggested letting the blood partially dry and chopping it into small pieces to allow any remaining water to seep out. Then it was cooked into a batter before sifting it into a jar. Mumia quickly became, remember, mumia? Not that one, but the one we were talking about earlier. Mumia quickly became popular throughout Europe within the 16th century and was thought to cure all kinds of ailments. To prepare it, the black remnants in the skull and abdominal cavities were scraped out of the mummies and placed in a large vase. Apothecaries mixed this mumia with herbs and wine, then prescribed it as a medicine for their patients. In Germany, it was still occasionally offered for sale in the early 20th century. All this just once again proves that the entire history of medicine, and very much of it today as well, is just fucking throwing shit at the wall, seeing what sticks. I can definitely say that for psychiatric medicine. Moving on. Around the early 1600s, a recipe for quote-unquote wine made from human flesh was invented in Germany. According to this recipe, the body of a human, preferably a young, flawless redhead, was used. The flesh was chopped up and mixed with aloe and myrrh, like the kind that baby Jesus received. Then it was mashed and cured into wine. Medicines made from the human body were not always ingested. In early modern Europe, human fat was used to treat problems of the outer body by either rubbing it directly on the skin or soaking the bandage in fat prior to applying it on the wound. Especially in the 17th and 18th centuries, man's grease, quote-unquote, as it was called, was in high demand. Executioners would sell the fat of the people they executed, which would then be melted and filled into vessels. Apothecaries sold it as a remedy for pain, inflammation, rabies, joint problems, and scars. What about obesity? How's that work, huh? That's a mind-boggler. The skin of the executed was also used for medical purposes. Pregnant women placed it around their belly during childbirth because it was thought to reduce birth pains. Others placed it around their neck to prevent thyroid problems. We'll get into this a little bit more later down the line as well when we talk about the Sacramentecas. Sacramentecas? The Sacmen. That's what they're called. Mumia, or originally mummy, referred to several different preparations in the history of medicine, from mineral pitch to powdered human mummies. It originated in Arabic mumia, a type of resinous bitumen found in Western Asia and used curatively in traditional Islamic medicine, which was translated as pissphaltus. Pissphaltus? Pissphaltus. Pissphaltus. Pissphaltus? Pissphaltus, from pitch and asphalt in ancient Greek medicine. In medieval European medicine, mumia bitumen was transliterated into Latin as mumia, meaning both a bituminous medicine from Persia and mummy. Merchants and apothecaries dispensed expensive mumia bitumen, which was thought to be an effective cure-all for many ailments. It was also used as an aphrodisiac, because of course, every goddamn thing is going to be used as an aphrodisiac sooner or later. Once again, throw it at the wall, see what sticks. Beginning around the 12th century, when supplies of imported natural bitumen ran short, mumia was misinterpreted as mummy, and the word's meaning expanded to a black resinous exudate scraped out from embalmed Egyptian mummies. This began a period of lucrative trade between Egypt and Europe, and suppliers substituted rare mumia exudate with entire mummies, either embalmed or desiccated. After Egypt banned the shipment of mumia in the 16th century, unscrupulous European apothecaries began to sell fraudulent mumia, prepared by embalming and desiccating fresh corpses. You unscrupulous European apothecaries, I can't believe you. During the Renaissance, scholars proved that translating bituminous mumia as mummy was a mistake, and physicians stopped prescribing the ineffective drug. Citation needed. Artists in the 17th to 19th centuries still used ground-up mummies to tint a popular oil paint called mummy brown. The usage of mumia as medicine began with the famous Persian mumia black piss asphalt. Piss asphalt. It's spelt piss asphalt, all one word. I'm just telling you. Piss asphalt remedy for wounds and fractures, which was confused with similarly appearing black bituminous materials used in Egyptian mummification. This was misinterpreted by medieval Latin translators to mean whole mummies. Starting in the 12th century and continuing until as far as the 19th century, mummies and bitumen from mummies would be central in European medicine and art, as well as Egyptian trade. Bitumen or asphalt had many uses in the ancient world, such as glue, mortar, and waterproofing. The ancient Egyptians began to use bitumen for embalming mummies during the 12th dynasty. They got the dates wrong. That ended in 1802, before Common Era. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 1991 to 1802, before Common Era. I forgot, it goes backwards. So silly. According to historians of pharmacy, it's a cool fucking historian, probably. According to historians of pharmacy, mumia became part of the materia medica of the Arabs, discussed by Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, 845 to 925, and Ibn al-Baitar, 1197 to 1248. Medieval Persian physicians used bitumen asphalt both as a salve for cuts, bruises, and bone fractures, and as an internal medicine for stomach ulcers and tuberculosis. Gross. They achieved the best results with a black piss asphalt that seeped from a mountain in Darabgurd, Persia. The Greek physician Pedanius Dioscorides, circa 50 to 70 D. Materia Medica, ranked bitumen from the Dead Sea as medicinally superior to the piss asphalt from Apollonia or Illyria, both of which were considered to be equivalent substitute for the scarce and expensive Persian mumia. During the Crusades, European soldiers learned firsthand of the drug mumia, which was considered to have great healing powers in cases of fractures and ruptures. The demand for mumia increased in Europe, and since the supply of natural bitumen from Persia and the Dead Sea was limited, the search for a new source turned to the tombs of Egypt. Misinterpreting the Latin word mumia as medicinal bitumen involved several steps. The first was to substitute substances exuded by Egyptian mummies for the natural product. The Arab physician Serapion the Younger, 12th century, thereabouts, wrote about bituminous mumia and its many uses, but the Latin translation of Simon Geniensis, circa 1303, that's when he died at least, said, mumia, this is the mumia of the sepulchres with aloes and myrrh, mixed with the liquid humiditate of the human body. Ugh. Two 12th century Italian examples. Gerard of Cremona mistakenly translated Arabic mumia as the substance found in the land where bodies are buried with aloes, by which the liquid of the dead, mixed with the aloes, is transformed, and it is similar to marine pitch. And the physician Matthias Platerius, perfect, said mumia is a spice found in the sepulchres of the dead, that is best, which is black, ill-smelling, shiny, and massive. The second step was to confuse and replace the rare black exudation from embalmed corpses with the black bitumen that Egyptians used as an embalming preservative. The Baghdad physician Abd al-Latif al-Baghdadi, 1162 to 1231, described ancient Egyptian mummies. Quote, in the belly and the skull of these corpses is also found in great abundance called mummy. Unquote. And added that although the word properly denoted bitumen or asphalt, quote, the mummy found in the hollows of the corpses in Egypt differs but immaterially from the nature of mineral mummy, and where any difficulty arises in procuring the latter may be substituted in its stead. Unquote. My. Renaissance scholars and physicians first expressed opposition to using human mumia in the 16th century. Took them that long. The French naturalist Pierre Ballon, 1517 to 1564, concluded that the Arab physicians, from whom the Western writers derived their knowledge of mumia, had actually referred to the piss asphalt of Dioscorides, which had been misconstrued by the translators. He said Europeans were importing both the falsely called mumia obtained from the scraping of the bodies and cadavers, and artificial mumia, made by exposing buried dead bodies to the heat of the sun before grinding them up. Oh, how the sausage is made. While he considers the available mumia to be a valueless and even dangerous drug, he noted that King Francis I always carried with him a mixture of mumia and rhubarb, never rub another man's rhubarb, to use as an immediate remedy for any injury. The barber surgeon Ambroise Paré, died 1590, revealed the manufacture of fake mumia both in France, where apothecaries would steal the bodies of executed criminals, dry them in an oven, and sell the flesh, and in Egypt, where a merchant who admitted collecting dead bodies and preparing mumia expressed surprise that the Christians, quote, so dainty-mouthed could eat the bodies of the dead, unquote. Paré admitted to having personally administered mumia 100 times, but condemned, quote, this wicked kinda of drug, it's written all old-timey, doth nothing help the diseased, unquote. And so he stopped prescribing it and encouraged others not to use mumia. The English herbalist John Gerard's 1597 Herb All described the ancient Egyptians using cedar pitch for embalming and noted that the preserved bodies that shopkeepers falsely called mumia should be what the Greeks called piss asphalton. Gerard blamed the error on the translator of Serapion, who interpreted mumia, quote, according to his own fancy, written old-timey, unquote, that it is the exudate from the embalmed human corpse. The medical use of mumia continued through the 17th century. The physicist Robert Boyle, 1627 to 1691, praised it as, quote, one of the useful medicines commanded and given by our physicians for falls and bruises, and in other cases too. Oh, how specific. The Dutch physician Stephen Blankaert's 1754 Lexicon Medicum Renovatum listed 4 types of mumia. Arabian exudate from bodies embalmed with spices and asphalt. Egyptian bodies embalmed with piss asphalt. Sun-dried bodies found in the desert. The natural piss asphalt, which oddly enough likely doesn't contain any piss whatsoever. Damn yous, ancient big pharma. Mumia's familiarity as a remedy in Britain is demonstrated by passing references in Shakespeare, Francis Beaumont, and John Fletcher, John Donne, and also by more detailed remarks in the writings of Thomas Brown, Francis Bacon, and Robert Boyle. By the 18th century, skepticism about the pharmaceutical value of mumia was increasing, and medical opinion was turning against its use. Say it ain't so. The English medical writer John Quincy, just John Quincy, nothing after that, wrote in 1718 that although mumia was still listed in medicinal catalogs, quote, it is quite out of use in prescription, unquote. Mumia was offered for sale medicinally as late as 1924 in the price list of the German chemical pharmaceutical company Merck. The Merck Group, who is still around. 1924. Selling ground up mummies. Just saying. Both mumia and asphalt have long been used as pigments. The British chemist and painter Arthur Herbert Church described the use of mumia for making mummy brown oil paints. Mummy, as a pigment, is inferior to prepared but superior to raw asphalt inasmuch as it has been submitted to a considerable degree of heat and has thereby lost some of its volatile hydrocarbons. Moreover, it is usual to grind up the bones and other parts of the mummy together so that the resulting powder has more solidity and is less fusible than the asphalt alone would be. A London colorman informs me that one Egyptian mummy furnishes sufficient material to satisfy the demands of his customers for 20 years. It is perhaps scarcely necessary to add that some samples of the pigment sold as mummy are spurious. That's a quote from painter Arthur Herbert Church. Way to go, buddy. Next up, we've got a similar drug, but not quite. A mellified man, also known as a human mummy confection, was a legendary medicinal substance created by steeping a human cadaver in honey. The concoction is detailed in Chinese medical sources, including the Bencao Gangmu of the 16th century. Relying on a second-hand account, the text reports a story that some elderly men in Arabia, nearing the end of their lives, would submit themselves to a process of mummification in honey to create a healing confection. This process differed from a simple body donation because of the aspect of self-sacrifice. The mellification process would ideally start before death. The donor would stop eating any food other than honey, going as far as to bathe in the substance. Shortly, the donor's feces and even sweat would consist of honey. Fucking gross. When this diet finally proved fatal, the donor's body would be placed in a stone coffin filled with honey. After a century or so, the contents would have turned into a sort of confection, meaning dessert, reputedly capable of healing broken limbs and other ailments. This confection would then be sold in street markets as a hard-to-find item with a hefty price. The Bencao Gangmu calls this concoction mirin, translated as honey person or mellified man. Mizi-rin, or honey-saturated person, is a modern synonym. The place it comes from is Tianfangguo, an old name for Arabia or the Middle East. The Chinese munayi, along with mummy, loanwords in many other languages, derives from Arabic mumia, for mummy, or from Persian mumiyayi, mummy, itself from mum, or wax. Mellification is a mostly obsolete term for the production of honey or the process of honeying something, from the Latin mellificare, meaning to make honey, or mel, which means honey. The ancient Greek word melissa means bee, honeybee, poetic honey. So, any Melissas listening, that's you, honeybee. Some of the earliest known records of mellified corpses come from Greek historian Herodotus, 4th century BCE, who recorded that the Assyrians used to embalm their dead with honey. A century later, Alexander the Great's body was reportedly preserved in a honey-filled sarcophagus, and there are also indications that this practice was known to the Egyptians. Another record of mellification is found in the Bencao Gangmu, section 52, Man as Medicine, quote-unquote. Under the entry for munayi, or mummy, it quotes the Chuo Ging Lu, which translates to talks while the plow is resting, circa 1366, by the Yuan dynasty scholar Tao Zhongyi and Tao Juqing. According to Tao Juqing, in his Chuo Genglu, in the lands of the Arabs, there are men 70 or 80 years old who are willing to give their bodies to save others. Such a one takes no more food or drink, only bathing and eating a little honey, till after a month his excreta, you know what it is, are nothing but honey. Then death ensues. His compatriots place the body to macerate in a stone coffin full of honey, with an inscription giving the year and month of burial. After 100 years, the seals are removed and the confection so formed used for the treatment of wounds and fractures of the body and limbs. Only a small amount taken internally is needed for the cure. Although it is scarce in those parts, the common people call it mellified man, or mirin, or, in their foreign speech, munai. Thus, Mr. Tao, but I myself do not know whether this tale is true or not. In any case, I append it for the consideration of the learned. That's what he put in the book. According to Joseph Needham and Liu Guijin, this content was Arabic, but Li Shizhen confused the story with a Burmese custom of preserving the bodies of abbots and high monks in honey, so that the Western notion of a drug made from perdurable human flesh was combined with the characteristic Buddhist motif of self-sacrifice for others. In her book, Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers, writer Mary Roach observes that the text points out that it does not know the veracity of the mellified man story. Li Shizhen's 1597 Binkao Gangmu, the classic materia medica of traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, included 35 human drugs, including organs, bodily fluids, and here's that word again, excreta. Crude drugs derived from the human body were commonplace in the early history of medicine. Some of these TCM human drug usages are familiar from alternative medicine, such as medicinal breast milk and urine therapy. That's a new one to me, both of them. Others are uncommon, such as the mellified man, which was a Western nostrum allegedly prepared from the mummy of a holy man who only ate honey during his last days and whose corpse had been immersed in honey for 100 years. Li condemns the usage of most items listed in the section. Chinese herbalists and doctors have used medicines from the human body for over 2 frickin' millennia. China. Millennia. The earliest known example is the 168 BCE Wuxie Bingfeng medical text that prescribes using ingredients such as hair, fingernails, and quote-unquote nuzibu, or women's menstrual cloth, is the translation on that. Li Shizhen, 1518 to 1593, and his magnum opus, the Binkao Gangmu, or Compendium of Materia Medica, is still one of the traditional Chinese physicians' standard reference books. Chapter 52, Renbu, or human section, is classified under the 4th category of animals, and is the last chapter in the Binkao Gangmu. Li's preface explains that this internal ordering, quote, "At the beginning, I have placed the waters and fires, followed by the soils. They are followed by the worms, scaly animals, and crustaceans, fowl and quadruped, and man concludes the list. From the low I have ascended to the noble." The human drug chapter contains 37 entries. Zhang is a kind or type. Unlike the first 35 that discuss human pharmaceuticals and drug prescriptions, the last 2 are only recorded, quote, "for doctors as a reference," unquote. Number 36, quote, "human beings from different locations," unquote, discusses personal influences from astrology, environment, geography, and climate, perhaps historical climatology in modern terms. Number 37, quote, "human beings in extraordinary conditions and of odd forms," ranges across cosmology, male and female sterility, pregnancy, hermaphroditism, metamorphosis, evolution, and monsters, aka the deformed. Now, without getting off too much of a tangent, right? Real quick. There's a long, long history of books going all the way back to, where's Gozer the Gozerian from? Sumeria? Babylon? Babylonian? Okay. Going all the way back to Sumeria. There are texts that are essentially like fortune-telling almanacs. They're like astrological books, except they're not telling fortunes by stars. They're telling fortunes by deformities, birth defects, tumors, in animals and humans. So, I mean, I don't know. You can kind of take this whole concept and sort of, I don't know, put a modern shine on it and say, like, okay, we've recorded that several cows have been born with what appear to be pseudo-humanoid faces on their bodies. Now, what does this mean? What does this bode for the future? I would say that there's either a high confidence rate that some form of toxin or disease is present. That's the extrapolation I would pull from that. That's just me. I'm just saying. But yes, there are these many old books that talk about various quote-unquote monsters and deformities and prodigium, etc., that are meant to tell the future from the various inherent meanings therein. I find it to be one of the most insane and not necessarily, I'm not going to say awesome, because it also just, I don't know. It's morbid. It's morbid. And I have a predilection towards morbidity sometimes. So, what can I say? Anywho, human drugs in the Bin Cow Gang Moo. Let's get into the list. Now, I believe they said there was 37 total. Let's go down the list here. Let's see. Number 1, Fabe, human hair, cut off the head. Number 2, Luan Fa, human hair collected from a comb. Number 3, Tugu, human dandruff. Number 4, Ursai, human earwax. Number 5, Jigu, human knee dirt. Knee dirt? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Chinese dirty knees. Anywho, 6, Zhaojia, human nails from fingers and toes. Number 7, human teeth. 7, Yachi, human teeth. Number 8, Renqi, human feces. Jiao, Taishi, this is number 9, human feces from a newborn, aka meconium. That's a word that I do not want to look up the definition of. Number 10, Ren Yao, human urine. Knew that had to be next. Number 11, Nibayan, white sediment of human urine. Okay, we're getting really specific. 12, Kyushi, processed white sediment of human urine. Okay, really specific. 13, Linshi, human urinary stone. It says calculus next to it. I assume that means like calcified back in the day, etc. 14, Pishi, human gallstone. 15, Ruji, human milk. 16, Furen Yu Shui, human menstrual blood. Of course, I don't know if you've like ever really like read into various occult practices, sex, magic, tantra, semen, and menstrual blood. They show up in all kinds of stuff like this all throughout time. I'm not saying like go out and start collecting it or anything. I'm just saying it shows up many, many times. Moving on. 17, human blood. 17 is Renju, human blood. 18, Renjing, human semen. 19, Kujintu, human saliva. 20, Qiyin, human tartar. I'm assuming that means tartar off the teeth? That's just a whole new level of horrific. 21, Renhan, human perspiration, aka the sweat. 22, Yan Lei, human tears. let's see here. 23, Renji, human breath. Maybe kept it a balloon of some sort. I don't know. 24, Rinpo, human ghost of a hanged person. I'm not quite sure how that works. If you get some human ghosts for various medicinal purposes, let me know, because I have a feeling that shit will probably get you high as fuck. Anyways, 24. Oh no, that was what I just did. Okay, 25. Jiju, human facial hair. 26. Yin Mao, human pubic hair. 27. Rengu, human bone. 28. Tianlingai, human bregma. Now, bregma, it sounds like one thing, and I know what you're thinking. I hear you barking, big dog, but it's not. It's not that. Bregma is actually, it's sort of the, like where the top of the skull comes together to the seams. This is sort of the element that holds all of that together. That apparently is what bregma is. I too had to specifically look up this word because bregma, schmegma, come on. Who wants some Fermunda cheese? Anyways, moving on. 29, Renbao, human placenta. Talked about that earlier. Get into it some more later. 30, Bao Yishui, processed fluid of human placenta. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. 31, Chuxing Kidai, human umbilical cord. 32, Renshi, human penis. I'm assuming these are sourced ethically. I'm assuming that, but we don't know that at all. Actually, from what I read earlier about how they get a hold of some of this stuff, I very much doubt that all of it was ethically sourced. Moving on. 33, Rendan, human gallbladder. 34, Renru, human flesh. 35, Munai, human mummy, or mellified man, as mentioned earlier. 36, Fangmen, human beings from different locations. And 37, Rangui, human beings in extraordinary forms. Once again, the deformed, birth defects, etc., hermaphroditism. Some of these Benkao Gangmu human drug names use obscure classical Chinese terms. Qi-yin, like tartar, is dental calculus or plaque, and uses the rare name yin, meaning sediment or dregs, instead of gu, such as filth in the common yagu. Renshi, or penis, uses shi, power, circumstance, in the archaic sense of quote-unquote male genitals, seen in kyushi, meaning castrate, emasculate. Well, there's an answer. While most names of these 35 Chinese quote-unquote human drugs, translated as hair, dandruff, and earwax, are understandable, several culture-specific terms need better explanation. Li Shijin distinguishes drugs from 4 types of human hair. 52, Fabe, especially a boy's hair cut from the head. Zonfa, hair left on a comb after using it. Jiju, facial hair. And Yinmao, pubic hair. Li details additional names and their corresponding pulse diagnosis acupuncture channels, which is far too convoluted to get into at this particular juncture. There are many circuits, we'll say, throughout the human body within traditional Chinese medicine, and I would say esoteric physiology as well. I mean, it's not just Chinese medicine, but the nervous system and its connection to things like acupuncture, it's all very, very complicated. If you meet someone who's a certified acupuncturist, I don't know, buy them a beer, because they probably had to study their fucking ass off to get to where they are. The obscure drug pishi, translated as gallstones or gallstones, and described as, quote, hard masses formed from extraordinary addiction or devotion, unquote, combines words meaning, quote, craving, addiction, extreme devotion, idiosyncrasy, indigestion, and and indigestion, unquote, and also, quote, stone, rock, unquote. Li Shijin explains, quote, if a person is especially devoted to a certain habit or thing, or when a person is suffering from the formation of hard masses, a strange thing will take shape, unquote. Li gives examples of similar things, quote, formed due to congelation or congealing of a kind of essence substance. Nu Hang. No, I'm sorry, let me do that again. Nu Hang, or ox bezoar, calculus bovis, or gubao, stone in a dog's kidneys or gallbladder. Jada, white stone that forms between the liver and gall of livestock, used for prayers to make rain. And Sheliji, or Sarira, a Buddhist relic supposedly found in cremated ashes, probably a gold ball, I'm assuming. For those who don't know what a bezoar is, it is essentially a solidified hairball. Not quite petrified, not quite stone, but it's just I don't know. If you ever had the dubious pleasure of dissecting owl shit in elementary school in your science class, it's kind of like that, but it's all hair. It's all hair, just solidified in a bezoar, and that's all you could really call it. Bezoar. These are also very prized in various forms of medicine, both East and West. You can look up pictures of the bezoar at your own discretion. They're not that bad to look at. I don't know. It's fine. They look like weird brownish rocks. Medicinal 18, the Rinjing, aka human semen, includes both male and female jingye, meaning male seminal fluid, semen, quote unquote, and female, quote, vaginal lubrication, quote unquote. Eber's papyrus, circa 1550 BCE, refers to both male and female semen. Li Shijin says, the essence substance of yin, or nutrient essence in blood, can be transformed into semen and gathered at the Ming Min, aka the Gate of Life, which is the house of Jing, vital essence and blood. Gate of Life. Do I need to to specify more what that is? I think you can figure it out. When a boy is 16 years old, the volume of his semen is 1 shing and 6 gay, over 1.5 liters. Jesus Christ. That explains a lot from when I was 16, at least. If it is well protected, it will accumulate to 3 shing, meaning nearly 5 liters. Jesus Christ. If it is not protected and is exhausted too quickly, less than a shing of it can be retained. Without blood, semen cannot form. Semen is a treasured thing within the body and is well nourished by qi, or qi, vital energy. Therefore, when blood is at its full capacity, the amount of semen will be increased. When qi, or qi, vital energy, accumulates, semen becomes overfilled. Evil alchemists fool stupid maidens and mate with them. Then they drink the vaginal secretions of the girls. Or they blend their own semen with the menstrual blood of a maiden and eat it. This mixture is called qiangong, aka lead and mercury. They consider this a treasured drug and indulge in sex excessively, eating such a foul thing. This practice will shorten their lifespans greatly. What a stupid thing. Unquote. Thanks, Li Shijin. Both Qshi, or processed white sediment of human urine with salt, and Baoyushui, processed fluid of human placenta, specify particular methods of iatrochemical or medicochemical preparation. Qshi, the aka, or actually, that literally translates to autumn mineral, translated as urea and processed white sediment of human urine with salt, or luo, was prepared from nibayin, or white urinary sediment, from the urine of either yin girls or yang boys. The Qi drug was called Qbing, or autumn ice, after recrystallization, similar to boiling seawater to get salt. Li Xinjin warns that, quote, some alchemists fake the product by calcinating salt in a furnace. Any substances alleged to be Qbing should be examined carefully to make sure it is genuine, unquote. Li Xijin outlines historical changes in the use of steroid-rich urine drugs. How about that? In ancient times, doctors used urinary precipitates to, quote, keep the blood in motion, greatly help sexual debility, bring down heat, kill parasites, and disperse poisons. But the princes and wealthy patricians disliked using it because they considered it unhygienic. So the iatrochemists, or Fang Shi, began to purify the sediment, making first Qi and later on Qbing, unquote, which licentious people used as aphrodisiacs. The Benkao Gangmu lists 6 methods of processing Qi through techniques including dilution, precipitation, filtration, evaporation, calcination, and sublimation. Bao Yishui, translated as old liquefied placenta and fluid of human placenta, was traditionally processed in 2 ways. In North China, people bury a human placenta in the ground for 7 to 8 years, and it dissolves into a fluid that is as clean as ice. Their words, not mine. In South China, people blend human placenta with gankao, or Glycyrrhiza urolensis. Oh, Chinese licorice root. Okay. They blend it with that. They blend it with shengma, or Simicifuga simplex, or bugbane, and other drugs, which they store in a bottle and bury in the ground for 3 to 5 years. Then they dig it up and use it medicinally. Then there's Rinpo, or human ghost. Apparently, this human ghost ingredient, a little more specifically, is talking about the human ghost of a hanged person. Some medicine refers to Chinese Hun and Po soul dualism between the Hun, which is the spiritual, ethereal yang soul that leaves the body after death, and the Po, the corporeal, substantive yin soul that remains with the corpse. Li Shijin explains, quote, Rinpo is found in the soil under a person who has hanged himself or herself. It resembles soft charcoal. Oh my, I think I know what this is as well. If the Rinpo is not dug out in time, it will penetrate deep into the earth where it cannot be traced, unquote. The Benkao Gangmu compares a hanged person's soul with similar phenomena. Quote, when a star descends to the earth, it turns into a stone. When a tiger dies, his eyesight descends and turns into a white stone. Human blood will turn into phosphorus or jade when it drops to the ground. Li only gives one prescription. Rinpo pacifies the heart and tranquilizes the soul and boldness. It treats convulsions, fright, and manic depressive psychosis. Grind Rinpo with water and take it by mouth. Well, there you have it. If you need to cure your convulsions, or your fright, or your manic depressive psychosis, or even your own boldness, get you some of that Rinpo that fell out of a hanged person. Get it quick. Otherwise, it's no good. See, next up we had Tilingai. This is the one I mentioned. Bregma, skullcap, Calvaria. It's translated as human skull or human skull top, and Bregma. In Taoist meditation and Qigong breathing practices, for those unfamiliar with Qigong, it's a energy cultivation of qi, etc. Tai Chi is probably the most over here in America at least, I think, the most popular form of Qigong. Or Qigong. Qigong? Yeah, Qigong. The bregma is considered the locus of the upper dantian, or elixir field. Li Shijin says, the skull of a human looks like a round cover. It is shaped like the sky. It is the palace of Niwan. Niwan, meaning clay pellet, is a Chinese transcription of nirvana. Furthermore, quote, is a place where ancestral wisdom is stored. Taoist alchemists stimulate the li, or fire, by kan, water, so as to restore its condition of pure qian, yang. In this way, a sacred fetus will form. Oh, in the skull? No. Then it may go out and come back in as it wishes. So the top of the skull is called Tian Lingai, meaning cover of the heavenly wisdom. This Shengtai, sacred embryo, or fetus / embryo of sainthood, denotes achieving Xian immortality through Neidan, or internal alchemy, biophysiological, sexual, fluid alchemy as practiced in ancient China. Cooper and Sivens say drilling the skull in order to provide a passage is still part of the initiation ritual for members of the esoteric Shingon sect in Taiwan today. This practice has also been attributed to certain Tibetan Buddhist practices revolving around the ritual of Phowa, or Poa, which revolves around either facilitating the soul's escape from the body, or in some cases, rituals of soul transference. That's right, you can switch one soul out of one body into another, if you were so inclined. But, of course, first off, you gotta be cool with a little dash of trepidation. So you're getting a hole in your fucking skull. It's happening. If this is what you want to do, this is the price you pay. So next up we've got Munai, mummy, mellified man. Talked about that a whole shitload. So the book Zhuogeng Lu by Dao Zhuqing. It is recorded that in the Tianfeng country there was an old man, 70 or 80 years old, who was willing to sacrifice his body for the general public. So he stopped taking any food except for drinking honey daily. He washed himself repeatedly. After a month, his stools and urine all turned into honey. After his death, people in the country kept him in a stone coffin filled with honey. The date was inscribed on the coffin, and he was buried in the ground for 100 years. Then the body became a honey-preserved thing that was used as a drug. Not a man, not a corpse, a thing, a honey man. Supposedly, it worked right away. Even in that country, this was something very precious. It was called Honeyman. The above is quoted from Dao Zhuqing's book. It is not known whether this is true or not, so it is recorded at the end of this section for further study, says the book. Reed says Burmese priests have the custom of preserving their chief abbots in coffins full of honey. I think we mentioned that earlier. Among the total contents of the 35 entries of various human body sourced drugs, drug components, these are said to provide cures for 287 different disorders, 287 prescriptions. 13 human drugs with 217 prescriptions first appeared in the Benkao Gangmu, while 22 types with 67 prescriptions came from the earlier Chinese Materia Medica. One from the Eastern Han Dynasty, 25 to 220, Shinong Benkao Jing. 5 from the Liang Dynasty, 502 to 557. Mingyi Bialu. 9 from the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907. Shinshu Benkao and Benkao Shiyi. 8 from the Song Dynasty, 960 to 1279. The text Da Ming Rihua Benkao, Kai Bao Benkao, Jiao Yu Benkao, and Zhenglei Benkao. And cited from non-medical literature, such as Zhenghua's, circa 290, Bo Wu Ji, a.k.a. The Record of Wide Knowledge. Good name. It's a good name for a book. Collection of Wonders. But this magical marital formula is not found in the current reconstructed version. Prescription 52-16-5, quote, to keep one's wife from being jealous, Wrap a toad in the cloth the wife uses to absorb her menses and bury it roughly 15 centimeters deep in the ground, 1 chi, or 31 centimeters, in front of the privy, aka the shitter. Since more than 1/3 of the human drugs were first. And you know what? Listeners, if anyone tries this, let me know how it worked out. Also, I commend you immensely for having the very chutzpah to even try to keep your wife from being jealous by wrapping a toad in the cloth she uses to absorb her menses and burying it of the outdoor toilet. Moving on. Since more than 1/3 of the human drugs were first added in Li Shijin's time, suggested that, quote, research into the origin of these relatively recent remedies, which may reveal a new interchange of thought and practice between China and other civilizations. It may have been that the Arabs were in this matter a common source of both Chinese and European medicine. Binkao Gangmu drug entries typically give the name used in the earliest Materia Medica references, synonyms, explanations from earlier authors, information about preparing the drugs, quote-unquote drugs, indications, effects, and prescriptions. As an example of these human drug entries, compare Reed's partial summary and Luo's full translation of 5226. It says, Shi Yi, pubic hair of the male, is used for snake bite. 12 hairs held in the mouth and sucked will keep the poison from entering the viscera. If you, I don't know, if you have the wherewithal to even remember this kind of shit after getting bit by a snake, I don't know. I owe you a Coke. For difficult labor, 14 hairs from the husband ashed and taken with lard in the form of a pill. Pubic hair from the female is used to treat gonorrhea and sexual diseases, also for swollen belly in the cow. This Shi Yi abbreviates Qin Kanki's Binkao Shi Yi, or supplement to the Materia Medica. Reed translates Yin Yang Yi Bing, or Yin Yang exchange disorders, as gonorrhea and sexual diseases, which compared to Luo's febrile disease transmitted by sex below. According to Cooper and Sivan, Yin Yang Yi is a general name for illnesses contracted through sexual intercourse with someone who has just recovered from them. STDs we're talking, which are diagnosed by the appearance of a yang pulse on the wrist under conditions in which a yin pulse is normally red and vice versa. So this one says, human pubic hair, Binkao Shi Yi. Indications, Qin Kang Chi. Male pubic hair is good as an antidote for snake bite. Hold 20 strands, well this one says 20, hold 20 strands of pubic hair in the mouth and swallow the juice. I don't know what juice they're talking about. This will prevent the snake's toxin from entering the abdomen. Human pubic hair is good for treating dystocia with transverse or footling presentation. Burn 14 pieces of pubic hair of the patient's husband, blend the residue with pig lard, and make into pills the size of soybeans. Swallow the pills. Kiajin Yaothing, essential prescriptions worth 1,000 gold. Li Shijin, female pubic hair is good for treating stranguria of 5 types and the Yin Yang Yi syndrome, febrile disease transmitted by sex. Prescription, 2 prescriptions collected recently. Prescription 5226-1 to treat the Yin Yang Yi syndrome, febrile disease transmitted by sex. After a man has just recovered from a serious disease and he has sex too soon, his scrotum becomes swollen and will shrink into his abdomen. This will be accompanied by severe colic. Burn female pubic hair into ash and take it by mouth right away. Also drink water in which female genitalia have been washed. Puji Feng from Prescriptions for Universal Relief. Here's prescription 5226-2. To treat an ox that is dying from the effects of a distended abdomen, wrap female pubic hair in a straw and feed it to the ox. This will work. White Tie Meow. Medical Secrets of an Official. Official what? Luo explains translating clause instead of drug in chapter 52. Quote, as most of the quote-unquote drugs from human beings are no more used medically, it seems rude to list them as drugs, unquote. Note the medical terms dystocia. This means a slow or difficult labor or delivery, and stranguria, i.e. strangury, a painful, frequent need to urinate when the bladder is largely empty or with little urine production. There are also moral aspects, of course. We're talking about STDs, once again, reflecting the well-known Confucianist inhibition against, mutilating one's body. Li Shizhen's preface, chapter 52, ethically condemns the use of some human drugs. Quote, the human is a different species from all other organisms used as sources of drugs. In later times, Taoist alchemists considered that many parts of the human body should be used as drugs, such as bone, flesh, and gall. This is really very rude and inhuman. I'm glad he's concentrating on how rude it is. This is very rude. I'm sure most people wouldn't. I think they kind of overlook the obvious, in my opinion. In the present category, all parts of the human body that have been used as drugs are recorded. The use of drugs from the human body that is not contrary to morality is recorded in detail. Those drugs that are cruel or foul are not recorded in detail, but all of them are listed in this category. Li does not give prescriptions for 12 of the 35 human drugs, which he's considered being cruel or foul. Li Shizhen sharply criticized medicinal usage of bone and flesh. In ancient times, people thought it a benevolent deed to bury discarded human bones. Such people thought that they would be rewarded with good. But some alchemists collect human bones and use them as a drug with the hope of making a profit from them. Should this be done to those who save people from diseases? Even dogs do not eat the bones of dogs. Why should a human eat the bones of other humans? Good one, Shizhen. Under the 5234 human flesh entry, Li denounces two earlier pharmacopoeias. Qin Kang Qi's early 8th century Bin Cao Shi Yi prescribes flesh as a good drug for laozhai, or consumptive and infectious diseases. And Li Shizhen says, quote, our bodies, skin, and hair are inherited from our parents and should be well protected. Even when parents are seriously ill, how can they bear to eat the flesh of their offspring? This is a practice followed only by stupid, foolish folk, unquote. You tell him, Li Shizhen. He quotes Tao Zhuxing's 8th century Zhuo Liu, quote, in ancient and present-day warfare, soldiers have eaten human flesh, calling it xiangru, meaning imagine it as meat. I shit you not, that is the one-to-one translation. Imagine it as meat. Or Liang, hold on, this is a tricky one. Hold on. Liang Jiaoyang, meaning meat of sheep with two legs. I guess the term long pig wasn't invented yet. And comments, quote, this is done by bandits and thieves without human hearts. Such damned villains, exclamation point, unquote. For such a renowned physician and herbalist, Li Shizhen was sometimes credulous. The penis entry, number 32, I believe it was, gives the common term yinjing, or yin-stock, and says, Li Shizhen, quote, a man's penis is not a drug. I agree. Well, no, I'm not. No, I'm backing off that one. Okay, a man's penis is not a drug. The book Zhuo Liu by Tao Zhuxing, Mr. Xin in Hangzhou was once caught in the act of raping a woman. He cut off part of his penis as a self-punishment, but his wound bled incessantly and did not heal for a month after. Someone told him to find the amputated part of his penis. He found it, pounded it into a powder, and took the powder by mouth with wine. After a few days, the wound healed. This might be a useful reference to those whose genitals are physically damaged, so it is recorded here for reference. Like I said long ago, I don't even know how long ago now. Got a fucked up dong? Eat a dong. There you go. Fixed. Luo's "those whose genitals are physically damaged," quote unquote, euphemistically translates the original metaphor, Kenchi, or silkworm nursery. Traditional way of saying prison where the punishment of castration was inflicted. Contemplating this story, quote, contemplating this story, it would seem that those who go down to the silkworm room, quote unquote, who are administratively sentenced to castration, should not be ignorant of this method, so I append it here. All right, thanks, Luo. In some Binkao Gangmu contexts concerning human drugs, Li Shizhen would accept the traditional theory but deny the contemporary practice. Under the human breath or qi section, Li says a quote-unquote very effective method for treating an elderly person who is suffering from cold and deficiency in the lower body is to have a boy or girl blow air through a cloth into the navel. Okay? However, he notes that contemporary Taoist alchemists have advocated the following way of using this energy. Let a maiden breathe air into the nostrils, umbilicus, and penis of an old man. This will provide a connection between the three dantians, the elixir fields at the upper, middle, and lower regions of the body. Li Shizhen moralistically warns, quote, "This is a small skill practiced by alchemists. If this is not done exactly as stipulated, such practice can only bring harm to the person." So, obviously Li Shizhen knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's been knee-deep in human fluid and body part medicine for quite some time. And this is his book, The Binkao Gangmu. Now, scientifically, it says, historians of science and technology in China analyzed urinary steroid hormones in the first serious scientific study of Chinese human drugs. They researched early references to the concentrated sex hormone preparations, Nibayin, or white urinary sediment, and Qixi, or processed urinary sediment, which Li Shizhen says were respectively first recorded in the Xinju Binkao and in the 1567 Binkao Mingchuan Materia Medica. The Chinese use of urine as a medicine, especially for impotence and other sexual disorders, has a long history. How about that? Didn't see that coming. Nope. Pun intended, I guess. Or, I don't know. Maybe. The Book of the Later Han describes three Taoist Feng Shi, or adepts, magicians, apothecaries, etc., alchemists, whatever you want to call it, who lived in the late 2nd century. Gan Shi, Dongguo Yanyan, and Feng Junda were, quote, all expert at following the techniques of Rong Qing, a semi-legendary figure associated with sexual physiology and commerce with women. They could also drink urine and sometimes used to hang upside down. They were careful and sparing of their seminal essence and inherited qi, and they did not boast with great words of their powers, unquote. Based upon the Binkao Gangmu list of 6 methods processing urine to produce Qixi, scientists conclude that from the 11th century onwards, Chinese alchemists, physicians, and iatrochemists were, and iatro just means medical, were successfully making quasi-empirical preparations of active substances with androgens and estrogens, a technique that modern biochemists did not develop until the early 20th century. And now look where things are. Whether for good or bad, whatever your opinion is, I don't give a shit. The physician William C. Cooper, not that one, that would be William N. Cooper, and the sinologist Nathan Simon chose what the Chinese call renyao, or human drugs, as a pilot experiment sample for pharmacologically analyzing the effectiveness of drugs used in traditional Chinese medicine. In contrast to many traditional Chinese plant, animal, and mineral pharmaceuticals with uncertain active constituents, the chemical composition of the human body and parts is well known, and their therapeutic effectiveness, or lack of it, can be objectively, if approximately, estimated without reference to their Chinese context. They selected 8 widely used human drugs from the 37 listed in the Binkao Gangmu: human hair, nails, teeth, milk, blood, semen, saliva, and bone. For each substance, Cooper and Sivan first analyzed the Binkao-Gangmu information about drug preparation and use, and then commented on the known chemical composition of the human drug and other ingredients in the prescriptions. They applied the criteria of clinical pharmacology to analyze the possible medicinal value of the Binkao-Gangmu pharmacopoeia's human drug prescriptions for 66 diseases, 58, that's 88% of which prescribe one or more ancillary ingredients. 50, this is 76%, of diseases treated would not have been relieved strictly by known properties of the prescription constituents or their combinations. And the other 16, this is 24%, of diseases might possibly be benefited from the human drug, another ingredient, or their synergistic combination. So essentially almost a quarter of possible ailments could be fucking strengthened by some of these human drugs, quote unquote. These 24 conceivably beneficial human drug prescriptions can be divided into positive and possible types. First, positive specific benefits for the ailments could come from effects of 3, that's 5%, human drug prescriptions alone, all for human blood. Drink blood mixed with water for internal hemorrhage from wounds. 2, that's 3% ancillary ingredients alone, not breast milk, but desiccant tongue oil is miraculously effective for calf sores. Second, uncertain or non-specific therapeutic benefits include 5 human drugs. Powdered left-hand fingernails and rush pith form a sticky mass applied to the canthus for removing foreign bodies in the eyes, like a sty in the eye. 3, this is 5%, ancillary ingredients. Pack and roast a silkworm cocoon with a man's fingernail trimmings and a boy's hair for ulcerated hemorrhoids, and 3 combinations of them. Human milk and copper coins cooked in a copper vessel for trachoma could form copper sulfate, which has a mild antibacterial effect for eye infections, ulcerated hemorrhoids. My God. Get yourself a silkworm cocoon. I don't know what to tell you. The authors conclude that less than 8% of all these disorders could have been, quote, positively cured by known pharmacological effects of the remedies cited, and raise the question of psychosomatic or social effects of human drugs in folk medicine. Mind over matter, folks. Now, there are ritual aspects as well. Having demonstrated that the effectiveness of most Binkao-Gangmu human drug prescriptions was not attributed to pharmacognosy, Cooper and Sivan examined whether the symbolic aspects of magic and ritual in Chinese folk medicine could explain why pharmacopoeias continue to list human drugs. Within their sample of 8 human drugs, prescriptions mention 24 symbolic ritual procedures. Sympathetic magic, for example, could explain using blood to treat blood loss. Once again, got a problem with your dong? Eat a dong. And attempting to treat bone damage with bone. Li Shizhen quotes the 9th century miscellaneous morsels from Yu Yang. The book Yu Yang Zaju, quote, once a military man in Jingzhou had an injured tibia. Dr. Zhang Qizheng treated him with a kind of medicinal wine, which was taken orally. A small segment of broken bone in the wounded tibia was taken out, and a kind of medicinal ointment was applied externally. The injury was cured. The patient kept the small piece of bone from his tibia under his bed. But 2 years later, there was a recurrence. Dr. Zhang said that the bone from the tibia was cold now. He searched for the bone and found it under the man's bed. He washed the bone with hot water, wrapped it in silk fabric, and kept it in a good place. After that, the pain was gone. This shows the interrelationship between the bone left under the bed and the pain. How can we say a withered bone has no sense? People should be aware of this. Thank you, Li Shizheng. Prescription 5227-4 specifies using a dead child's bone. Quote, to treat bone fractures, bone of infant, calcined, and muskmelon seed, stir-fried. Grind the above ingredients into powder. Take the powder by mouth with good wine. It stops the pain right away. Demonic possession and demonic medicine are ancient Chinese beliefs. For example, the Binkao Gangmu says bregma, the skull bone, is good for treating several tuberculosis-like diseases that are supposedly caused by evil spirits. The sometimes synonymous names of these sicknesses are difficult to translate, as shown by the following renderings provided by Cooper and Sivan, Luo and Zhang, and Unstuhled, several authors who set this whole thing up. Chuanqi, cadaver vector disease, also known as consumptive and infectious disease, or corpse evil transmission. Shizhu, cadaver fixation disease, consumptive and infectious disease, corpse attachment illness. My mind is going to some of the worst places possible, I think, but I don't know quite what cadaver fixation and corpse attachment. Maybe it just means it could mean a couple things. I don't know. They don't provide a lot of context on these. Guzheng, bone steaming disease, consumptive disease with general debility, or bone steaming. So I guess this is when your bones evaporate, which sounds fucking terrifying. Gui Chiju, no translation from 1973, but it also is translated as consumptive disease of unknown cause, or demon chi attachment illness. Li Shizhen quotes Qing Kangqi's explanation that when a piece of skull is cleaned, simmered in a young boy's urine, and then buried in a pit, quote, this will infuse the drug with a soul. Interesting. Li also quotes Yang Shiying that the Shizhu disease, quote, is caused by a ghost that hides within a person's body and does not come out. So the disease is a prolonged one. When treated with human skull top, the ghost's soul will be dispelled from the person's body and the syndrome may subside, unquote. Cooper and Sivan note that the Guzheng bone steaming disease, or Chuanqi cadaver vector disease, quote, passes from one member of a family to another, sapping their strength and killing them in turn. The name comes from the patient's feeling of feverishness or steaming. Okay, I got it. In the marrow of his bones. The syndrome, as described in classic medical works, corresponds on what the whole to that of pulmonary tuberculosis. However, they also say that whether this demon disease really meant pulmonary tuberculosis or some other debilitating infectious disease is really not pertinent, quote, because bone would be ineffective in the treatment of any infectious process, unquote. Jeez. So for Ting Ling Aisang, powder of human skull top, which is said to be, quote, good for killing worms in a consumptive disease, in case you're infested with worms. I got worms, that's what we're going to call it. No, we're going to call you a doctor to make some powder of human skull top. This mentions seeing a Chuanqi. First, take, quote, one piece of human skull top, 2 fingers wide. Simmer the drug with tenjing or sandalwood, then stir fry with butter. Then chant incantations, unquote. 15 herbal ingredients are added with the skull bone into a decoction, well, I've never heard that one. I know concoction, not decoction. I guess that's a reduction of sorts, which will cause the patient to defecate worms of strange shapes. Good Lord. Okay, so this is a ancient deworming drug, apparently, for humans. Cooper and Sivan translate the chant that Luo omits, quote, this incantation is recited 7 times in one breath. Quote, Divine Father Thunder, Sage Mother Lightning, if you meet a cadaver vector, you must control it. Quickly, quickly, as ordered by the law. So 7 times in one breath. Say that sentence. This same prescription also mentions Taoist ritual purification. Quote, before the drug is processed, one who prepares the drug should abstain from meat and wine and should stay in a clean, quiet room far away from the patient so that he cannot smell it. When the drug is prepared, keep away chickens, dogs, cats, and other animals, as well as sons in mourning and women. The room should be kept clear of all ugly and dirty things. Unquote. Okay. For treating the Guzheng bone steaming disease, It says, quote, to treat consumptive disease with general debility and hectic fever due to yin deficiency, stir fry a piece of human skull the size of a comb until it turns yellow. Then simmer it in 5 shing of water until 2 shing are left. Drink the decoction in 3 draughts. This is a drug that will cure the patient very effectively, unquote. 2 other cases of human drug treatments for demonic medicine are sanshi, or 3 corpses, demonic spirits believed to live in the human body and hasten death, usually in the form of demonic worms, kind of. Goo. It's goo poisoning. The goo corpses. These 3 corpses, there's a holiday. I forget when it's supposed to be, but essentially during this holiday, people will stay up all night to make sure that none of the 3 worms leave their body while they sleep. Because when these 3 worms essentially leave your body, they go to the afterlife and basically say, like, oh, by the way, the guy whose stomach I live in, he should be dead soon. So make sure that happens, whoever's in charge of the celestial bureaucracy. And then they come back down and go back into the stomach. So there's this holiday when this is supposed to happen, and people will stay awake all night to make sure that these demon worms, these ghost worms that live in your belly, will not do this. It's pretty fucking insane. I don't mean like, you know, I don't mean that as a it's just a crazy story. Like, I don't know. It's I like the mythology of it. It's different. I don't know. Like the parallel and intersect and overlap between folklore and spirituality and parasitic infection. And you know what? There's actually been like lots of cultures throughout ancient history have more often than not associated parasitic infection with demons and demon possession. So the two kind of go hand in hand. There's also goo poisoning or goo magic, also known as ku, Ku in Japan, or kudoku. A poison produced by venomous insects casts a black magic spirit possession over someone. This is, I mean, it's animal cruelty, so if you don't like that, but it's the kind of animals. Here's the thing about this. This is where several poisonous animals are taken. Usually, I think it's a snake, a centipede, a toad. I don't remember. It's usually like, I think this has like strange mytho-contextual links to the 5 deadly venoms of martial arts fame. Either that or that's just totally fucking made up movie. I don't know. But there's several animals that are taken that are all poisonous. And you take these poisonous animals and you put them in a container together, and they will eventually fight and kill each other until the one that is left surviving becomes the most poisonous. Like, it's been imbued with the poison and killing and illness spreading fucking power of all the other animals that it fought and survived. So it becomes, you know, fucking shot caller on the block, basically. And actually, now that I think about it, this whole goo poison ritual, it's a good metaphor for prison. I don't know. Except that's bad. I don't know. Actually, there's a lot of metaphors you could find in this whole goo poison process. But anyways, that's how you do that. So, and then you harness the poison and use it to cast a black magic spirit possession over someone. So there you go. Now you know how to do that. The first Binkao Gangmu prescription for human nails is not from Chinese medical text, but from a Taoist ritual for expelling what Cooper and Sivan describe as the 3 corpse worms, the chief of the inner gods, who are to the individual microcosm what the celestial bureaucracy is to the cosmos. So, prescription 5261, the method of beheading the three corpses or three worms involves supernaturally cutting the nails in accordance with the traditional 60-day sexagenary cycle in the Chinese calendar and Chinese astrology. To kill Sanxi, the book, Taisheng Zhuangge, cut fingernails on Gingqin, 17th days, and cut toenails on Jiawu, 31st days. Burn the nails into ash on the 16th day of the 7th month of the year. Take the ash by mouth with water. In this way, all the Sanxi and the 9 worms will turn into ash. It is also said that on the days of Jiayin, 51st, Sanxi will invade the hands. Trim the fingernails on those days. Sanxi will invade the feet on the days of Jiawu, the 31st. So trim the toenails on those days. Luo footnotes that Taoists believe Sanxi to be a kind of spirit haunting a patient. It may also be manifested as subcutaneous nodes appearing on 3 portions of the body cavity. Your guess is as good as mine which cavity that is. But, subcutaneous nodes. Weird bumps. Heard that before. What with kitsune possession? Strange. I don't know. Roving tumors, etc. Weird shit. Goo poisoning, or goo poisoning diseases, are supposedly treatable with 4 human drugs. So if someone puts the 5 deadly venoms whammy on you, this is what you need. Dandruff, teeth, feces, and placenta. Maybe not all 4, but one of those ought to do it, I would hope. I hope you don't need all 4. My God. For instance, quote, to treat goo, disease caused by noxious agents produced by various parasites, no matter whether caused by a herb, a snake, or a dung beetle. It seems as if such things enter into the throat, causing terrible pain and making the patient feel as if he is dying. Wash a ziheche? Ziheche? Hold on. Wash a placenta hominis, or dried human placenta, and cut it into slices. Dry the slices in the sun and grind them into powder. Wash down 1 gambi, an ancient coin, of the powder each time with boiled water, unquote. Present day, so that's how you get rid of goo poisoning. There you go. Present day Chinese doctors and herbalists continue to prescribe human drugs despite their lack of proven efficacy. Cooper and Sivan note that a modern traditional Chinese medicine pharmacognosy handbook lists 634 medicinal substances, including 5 from humans: placenta, fingernails, ashed hair, urine, and urine sediment. 4 centuries after Li Shizhen considered the bioethical and biomedical dilemmas of using human drugs, 20th century technological and medical advances have raised new related questions of organ transplants, transplantation medicine, organ trade, tissue banks, human cloning, and the commodification of human body parts and fluids, like plasma banks or stem cells, etc., etc. All that and a bag of dongs. Now, we're gonna leave China now. I think that kind of gives you a good idea of the rich, complex history, traditional Chinese medicine, and the use of human-derived drugs, and to know that this stuff has come a long way. As I just said, I mean, I just listed several, modern, contemporary medical extrapolations from this sort of thing: organ transplants, transplantation medicine, organ trade, tissue banks, human cloning, and the commodification of human body parts or fluids, etc. Anything that deals with the illegal obtainment and trade of these is known as the red market. So, just if you ever hear anything about the red market, that's what that is. Now, next up is human placentophagy, or consumption of the placenta. It's defined as the ingestion of a human placenta postpartum at any time by any person, either in raw or altered, e.g. cooked, dried, steeped in liquid, form. Placentophagy can be divided into two categories: maternal placentophagy and non-maternal placentophagy. While there are several anecdotes of different cultures practicing placentophagy in varying cultures, maternal placentophagy started in the U.S. in the 1970s. Because of course it would be in the fucking 1970s, with little to no evidence of its practice in any traditional or historic culture. Midwives and alternative health advocates in the U.S. are the primary groups encouraging postpartum maternal placentophagy. Maternal placentophagy has a small following in Western cultures, fostered by celebrities like January Jones. Doesn't ring a bell. The placenta has high protein, rich iron, and nutrient content, but there is inconclusive scientific evidence about any health benefit to its consumption. The risk of human placentophagy are also still unclear, but there has been one confirmed case of an infant needing hospitalization due to a group B strep blood infection tied to their mother's consumption of placenta capsules. Maternal placentophagy is defined as, quote, a mother's ingestion of her own placenta postpartum, in any form, at any time. Of the more than 4,000 species of placental mammals, most, including herbivores, regularly engage in maternal placentophagy, thought to be an instinct to hide any trace of childbirth from predators in the wild. The exceptions to placentophagy include mainly humans, pinnipeds, sirenia, cetaceans, whales and shit, pterodactyls, and camelids. Okay, non-maternal placentophagy is defined as, quote, the ingestion of the placenta by any person other than the mother at any time, unquote. Such instances of placentophagy have been attributed to the following: a shift toward carnivorousness at birth, specific hunger, and general hunger. With most eutherian mammals, the placenta is consumed postpartum by the mother. Historically, humans more commonly consume the placenta of another woman under special circumstances. And oh my, aren't those circumstances ever so special. In 1979, an article in the Bulletin of the New York Academy of Medicine, William Ober evaluated the possibility that certain ancient cultures that practiced human sacrifice also practiced human placentophagy. However, a 2010 survey of 179 societies found that none practices placentophagy regularly. A 2007 study similarly found that placentophagy has never been described as a culturally normative practice in any historical sense. Except for January Jones. She's real into it. Placentophagy might have occurred during the siege of Jerusalem in 587 BC, due to the famine experienced by the Judeans, according to scholar Jack Miles in his Pulitzer Prize-winning God, a Biography. I'm thinking of an autobiography. From an evolutionary perspective, it appears that the human species must have stopped practicing maternal placentophagy at a fairly early stage, since there is no evidence that has ever been common. One hypothesis that has been offered is that the smoke of firewood caused environmental toxins to accumulate in the placenta, leading to harmful health outcomes for prehistoric mothers who stayed close to the community hearth and ate their placentas. However, there is no direct evidence for a taboo against placentophagy in human myth. The shift away from placentophagy may have occurred over 1 million years before present. It may have been the consequence of a more aquatic lifestyle, in agreement with the absence of placentophagy in aquatic mammals, such as cetaceans, pinnipeds, and sirenia. Human placenta has been used traditionally in Chinese medicine. Oh, look at that, we're coming back to it. Though the mother is not identified as the recipient of these treatments, a 16th century Chinese medical text, the Compendium of Materia Medica, states in a section on medical uses of the placenta that, quote, when a woman in Liuqiu has a baby, the placenta is eaten, and that in Bagui, the placenta of a boy is specially prepared and eaten by the mother's family and relatives. Another Chinese medical text, the Great Pharmacopoeia of 1596, recommends placental tissues mixed with human milk to help overcome the effects of qi exhaustion. Dried, powdered placenta would be stirred into 3 wine cups of milk to make a connected destiny elixir. Connected destiny elixir. To call something that today, I guess it would have to be like, I don't know, a giant shot of Jaeger with a roofie in it, because after that, somebody's destinies are inextricably linked after fucking Everwords for that. So the elixir would be warmed in a sunlight, taken as a treatment. It's not known exactly how traditional this remedy was, nor exactly how far back it dates. In Jamaica, bits of placental membranes were put into an infant's tea to prevent convulsions caused by ghosts. In ancient Egypt, as well, pieces of placenta were soaked in milk and fed to the infant to test for infant mortality. The Chaga of Tanganyika placed the placenta in a receptacle for 2 months to dry. Once dry, it is ground into flour from which a porridge is made. The porridge is served to old women of the family as a way of preserving the child's life. In central India, women of the Kol tribe eat placenta to aid reproductive function. It is believed that consumption of placenta by a childless woman, quote, may dispel the influences that keep her barren, unquote. The Kartachi of the Solomon Islands mix placenta into the mother's supply of powdered lime for chewing with the areca nut. In the Maremma region of Italy, it was common at one time to mix pieces of placenta into the food of a new mother without her knowledge. This was intended to promote a healthy flow of milk. Sorry. Beliefs behind the practices of consuming the placenta, whether in part or in whole, commonly reflect acknowledgement for the vast work of this organ for the baby in utero, serving as its quote-unquote protector and providing critical vital functions for the baby before birth. The placenta can be seen as the tree of life, as a genetic quote-unquote twin, to the fetus, an angel. And reasons for ingesting the placenta may reflect spiritual beliefs as much as the pragmatic ones listed above. Traditional practices to revere and honor the placenta that do not include consumption may include placenta burial, such as in Saudi Arabia. Such traditions reflect human birthing practices wherein umbilical cords may not have been severed while the cord is still pulsing, avoiding blood loss and infection, and may include practices that retain the placental connection until after it has been delivered and the baby is already nursing. Modern practice of placentophagy is rare, as most contemporary human cultures do not promote its consumption. Placentophagy did receive popular culture attention in 2012, however, when American actress January Jones, once again, credited eating her placenta as helping her get back to work on the set of Mad Men after just 6 weeks. Well, if there's any reason to eat your own placenta, it's to get back to work and make new episodes of Mad Men. Instances of placentophagy have been recorded among certain modern cultures. In the 1960s, male and female Vietnamese nurses and midwives of Chinese and Thai background consumed the placentas of their young, healthy patients for reasons unspecified, as reported by a Czechoslovakian medical officer at the hospital of Czechoslovak Vietnamese Friendship in Haiphong. Placentas were stripped of their membranous parts and fried with onions before being eaten. Okay. A more recent cross-cultural ethnographic study by researchers at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, surveyed 179 contemporary human societies and identified only one culture, Chicano, or Mexican American, that mentioned the practice of maternal placentophagy. This account, centering on Chicano and Anglo midwifery in San Antonio, Texas, stated, quote, cooking and eating part of the placenta has been reported by a couple of midwives. One Anglo mother was reported to have roasted the placenta, unquote. This instance, however, may not be indicative of any larger cultural trends, as no other records of placentophagy were found in the Chicano culture. This same study has also recorded 3 references of non-maternal placenta phagy. Traditional Gullah medicine dictates that when a baby is born with a caul with amniotic membranes over the face at birth, the placenta is made into a tea and then consumed by the child to, quote, prevent them from seeing spirits that would otherwise haunt them, unquote. There's a whole lot of birth caul folklore around the world. It's numerous and complex. Practice of paternal placenta phagy was identified in the Malakula of Melanesia. Quote, in Espiritu Santo, the new father eats a pudding made from the cooked placenta and blood, unquote. Oral administration of the placenta was reported in Sino-Vietnamese medicine to aid the recovery of those suffering from tuberculosis. Real quick, back to the birth cult thing. Any child who is allegedly born with the birth caul over their face is said to be blessed with psychic powers. This is like a ancient thing in a lot of cultures. In a follow-up study, the UNLV researchers were joined by colleagues at the University of South Florida and surveyed women who had engaged in maternal placenta phagy previously. Of the 189, that's too many, placenta phagic women surveyed, the researchers found that 95% of participants had quote-unquote positive or quote-unquote very positive subjective experiences from eating their own placenta, citing beliefs of quote-unquote improved mood, increased energy, and improved lactation. Well, isn't that nice? The authors themselves, however, state that, quote, exceedingly little research has been conducted to assess these claims and no systematic analysis has been performed to evaluate the experiences of women who engage in this behavior, unquote. In the United States, as many as 30% of women who planned community births may consume the placenta, often citing avoidance of postpartum depression as the reason. During pregnancy, women often become iron deficient because iron is transported across the placenta to the fetus. Because low levels of iron are known to negatively affect mood, researchers are exploring the possible link between iron status and postpartum depression. Placenta phagy advocates claim that the placenta provides an excellent source of dietary iron and may therefore improve maternal postpartum iron status. However, this could also be attributed to a study taking a beef placebo, showing much the same results. So, science is still out on the placenta phagy controversy. Is this the whole thing not controversial? I don't know. I guess it just depends on where you're, what kind of a gourmand you consider yourself, I suppose. Many researchers remain skeptical of whether the practice of placenta phagy is of value to humans. A 2015 review found that while a minority of women in Western countries perceive placenta phagy as reducing the risk of postpartum depression and enhancing recovery, there is no evidence that this is the case. The same study also found inconclusive evidence that placenta phagy was of any benefit to facilitating uterine contraction, resumption of normal cyclic estrogen cycle, and milk production. As well, the author stated that the risks of placenta phagy also warrant more investigation. A researcher who had previously researched why animals eat their placenta stated in 2007 that, quote, people can believe what they want, and they're going to, no matter what. That's me interjecting. But there's no research to substantiate claims of human benefit. The cooking process will destroy all the protein and hormones. Drying it out or freezing it would destroy other things. UNLV researchers found that some essential minerals and steroid hormones remained in human placenta that was cooked and processed for encapsulation and consumption. Although human placenta phagy entails the consumption of human tissue by a human or humans, its status as cannibalism is debated. Now, switching gears, but also keeping in mind Hollywood land. Remember this, cosmetics, etc. I thought about including the use of children's foreskins being used in contemporary cosmetics, as more or less infamously promoted by the beautiful Sandra Bullock on an episode of The Ellen Show, as well as various real-world reports of child cannibalism. However, I chose not to for several reasons. First, I probably used this joke before, but Sandra Bullock, if you want foreskin on your face, all you have to do is call me. Secondly, I chose not to for several reasons. One, it doesn't necessarily always fit into the overarching theme of so-called medicinal cannibalism, though we will dip into a certain historical case of child murder later on that was either directly or indirectly informed by this historical line of thought concerning medicinal cannibalism. Two, it largely involves either famines, which I'll begrudgingly overlook for now on account of certain grounds of quote-unquote moral ambiguity, for lack of a better term, or serial killers also, and you can pretty much find anything you want across almost all media platforms on disgusting monsters like Albert Fish, Fritz Harman, Andre Chikatilo, Joachim Kroll, Nathaniel Barjona, etc. And most of their crimes were motivated by sexual sadism, so also no thanks. But I will add that the Wikipedia article on child cannibalism is quite extensive and covers some, let's just say, more out-of-the-ordinary cases, such as Terrare, the freakish French polyomnivore, Peter Neers, who I previously covered, collected various feti for black magical purposes, as well as various quote-unquote werewolf murderers throughout history, though I suppose this also falls largely under the MO of psychosexual sadism as well, but the lycanthropy/occult angles do add an interesting dimension to it, in which case I may come back to that particular topic one day, because there's quite a few. I've also previously covered Manuel Blanco Romasante, who oddly enough figures somewhat tangentially into this episode as well already. Then there's also one particularly horrific story of a married couple from Iraq named Aboud and Kajawa, who in 1917 are alleged to have murdered over 100 children in order to eat and sell their flesh. That oddly enough combines both the motivations of famine and sadism. But I mostly chose not to include any of these for reason number 3 on this list. Even I have my limits. Number 3, even I have my limits. But who knows, I could possibly also cover the married cannibal Christians of Mosul in a future episode, if I can muster up the intestinal and or testicular fortitude to delve deep into such a case. Now, let's jump into the final track of this episode. We're going to talk about the Sacamantecas, aka the fat extractor in Spanish, or mantequero, the fat seller maker, fat maker. However, the term mantequero also does have a very unique similarity to the folkloric monster manticore. So there is that. It's the Spanish name for a kind of boogeyman or criminal characterized by killing for human fat. Perhaps you've heard me mention them before. Julian Pitt Rivers reports in his study of Alcalá de la Sierra that belief in the village children can be stolen, or the belief that village children can be stolen by an outsider called El Sacamantecas, disguised as a beggar or a trader who is hired by a rich man whose ill child can only be cured with the blood of healthy babies. The practice of blood donation lent credence to the myth. Gerald Brennan describes the mantiquero as a monster in human form who lives in deserted areas and feeds on manteca, or human fat. Upon capture, he shouts in a high-pitched voice and, unless just fed, looks thin. Brennan found the myth alive during his stays in the Alpujarra in Andalusia. In 1927 or 1928, he had sublet his Yegan home to the British writer Dick Strachey, nephew of Leighton Strachey. One day, Strachey was walking on rough terrain where he saw 3 Romany men, of whom he was very suspicious because, of course, a British gentleman is going to be highly suspicious of Romany men. Fearing that they were bandits, he ran away. But the three men chased him and drew their knives, shouting at him. They believed him to be a mantiquero and wanted to kill him and to use his blood for magical remedies. However, the eldest man, a convict, judged it safer to bring Strachey to the mayor. They offered to slit his throat themselves, but Strachey claimed in rudimentary Spanish to be a relative of the British King George V and convinced the mayor that he wasn't a monster. Happy ending. A friend of Britain found that in Torremolinos, all the girls believed in mantiqueros. In the urban version of the legend, an old evil marquis needs transfusions of baby's blood to rejuvenate. Does this sound familiar? Does this sound like something maybe you've heard before? In the last, I don't know, what is it, 2025? Maybe the last 9 years? Something like that? I don't know. It's been around a while. Change babies to teenagers, and it's kind of like all those old, rich Silicon Valley weirdos of today's America. How about that? Also out west. Hollywood land, Silicon Valley. Who'd have thunk it? The Peruvian tradition of the Pishtaco has many similarities, being understood as monsters or foreigners who collect human fat from their victims. Urban legends about organ trafficking show similar fears in modern contexts. Vampires in European folklore draw blood from humans. Brennan finds a similarity between the mantiquero and the Persian manticore, a man-eating chimera cited by H.G. Tully, Ctesias Persica, and Aristotle's History of Animals. Other boogeymen in Hispanic culture are the Coco, or Cucuy, the Sackman, and the Tío del Sain in Murcia. There are, however, real Sacamanticas. There's the aforementioned Manuel Blanco Romasanta, 1809 to 1863, who was the first serial killer documented in Spain. He operated in Galicia. With the fat of his victims, he made soap for sale. During his trial, he alleged to be cursed with lycanthropy. The next individual is being included because this is where the folklore of the Sacamanticas really took off. So it seemed fairly important to the overall arc of this folklore, although whether or not he actually partook in any actual sort of so-called medicinal cannibalism, quote-unquote, is somewhat debated. Nevertheless, we have Juan Diaz de Garallo y Ruiz de Argandoña, also known as the Sacamanticas, the fat extractor in Spanish. 17th of October, 1821, he was born. 11th of May, 1881, he was died. He was a Spanish serial killer active near Vitoria, Álava, who strangled 5 women and a 13-year-old girl and attacked 4 other women during 2 different periods, 1870 to 1874 and 1878 to 1879. A lust-motivated serial killer, Garallo first killed prostitutes after hiring and murdering women that he saw walking alone in the country. His last 2 victims, murdered in consecutive days, were also stabbed, and the second was disemboweled. Garallo's persona and crimes were the subject of El Sacamanticas, an 1881 monograph written by Ricardo Becerro de Bengoa, who visited Garallo while he was in prison awaiting execution. Garallo was born on, as previously mentioned, October 17, 1821, the 9th child of farmers Nicolas Diaz de Garallo and Norberto Ruiz de Argandoña in Eguilaz, a village near the town of Salvatierra in Álava, Basque Country, Spain. He was illiterate, never received an education, hardworking and austere. Between the murders, he lived and worked in Vitoria as usual, attracting no suspicion. Just a quiet guy, just a regular quiet guy. I don't know. Just a regular quiet guy. He just worked hard and kept to himself. At age 14, during the First Carlist War, Garallo was sent by his parents to serve in the neighboring towns of Salvatierra, Alaiza, Ocariz, Izarza, Anwa, and Alegria du Lancy, where he worked temporarily as a farmhand, shepherd, and coal miner. In 1850, he began to serve Antonia Berostegueta, a widow from Vitoria who was looking for a servant with experience in farming and field management, and shortly after, they got married. Berostegueta was nicknamed La Zoromboña after her first husband, known as Zorombon, a nickname that Garallo would inherit. Citation needed. The couple had 5 children, 3 of whom, Candido, Josefa, and Thomas, survived. This marriage ended in 1863 with the death of La Zerombonia, and Garallo married his second wife, Juana Salazar, shortly after. Unlike the first marriage, which was happy, the second was loaded with conflict between his new wife and her stepchildren. His eldest son left to serve in a house, and the other two increasingly spent their time in the street, away from the family home. Salazar died from the smallpox in 1870, and Garallo committed his first murder shortly after. Well, could it be a broken heart is what lies behind all this? Garallo married a third time, again shortly after the death of the previous wife, and this marriage was even more plagued by conflict, as the woman was an alcoholic. Only after 5 years of marriage, in 1876, Garallo found his wife bedridden and in agony upon returning from work. He called for a doctor, but was told that nothing could be done about it. 1 month later, he married his fourth and final wife, an old widow named Juana Ibisate. Although the relationship with his later wives wasn't ideal, there is no evidence that Garallo had any part in their deaths. When asked about the most suspicious, the third, the imprisoned Garallo declared, quote, "No, I did not kill her, because if I had, I would have declared it, as I have done with the others." So his first murder spree. Garallo's first victim was a well-known woman from Vitoria who had turned to prostitution while her husband was in jail, and he hired her on the afternoon of April 2nd, 1870. The two walked out of the city through the Portal del Rey, took the road to Navarre, and stopped by the Ricashiki stream to have sex. Once done, Garallo offered her 3 Spanish reals, and she protested for finding it too short. Garallo offered 1 more real, but she demanded 5. At this point, Garallo threw her to the ground and oppressed her throat with both hands until she became unconscious. He then took his victim to the stream and submerged her head in the water until she drowned. Garallo then undressed the body and placed it face up on the ground. He sat next to the body for a while before covering it with the clothes and returned to the city during the night. The murder was discovered the next morning by a servant who was picking flowers by the bankside and alerted the authorities, but the case was archived for lack of evidence shortly after. The second murder was committed on March 12, 1871, also during the afternoon. Garallo met a poor woman begging in Portal del Rey and offered her to come home with him. After she said that she had not eaten that day, Garallo gave her 1 real and told her to not get late, saying that he would be waiting for her on the road to Navarre. The woman bought bread and a glass of wine at an inn, and the two walked the road to a place known as La Biscara, 400 meters from the Ricashiki, where they had sex. Once again, Garallo offered a short sum. The woman protested, and he brought her down and strangled her with his hands, returning home at night. The body was discovered the next day, but once again, the investigators found no lead to the culprit. Boy, this guy's a fucking cheapskate. The third murder occurred on August 21st, 1872. This time the murder was at noon, and the victim wasn't a prostitute. Garallo was traveling to Gamada Mayor when he met a 13-year-old servant girl walking in the opposite direction, who had been sent on an errand to Vitoria by her employers. Garallo seized her and hauled her off the road, squeezing her throat until she became unconscious and raped her. He strangled her again until she died and hid the body in a ditch, returning to Vitoria by 2 p.m. The discovery of the murder the next day caused a great commotion in Vitoria and its regions. However, the doubled effort of the investigators met again with a lack of leads, and even worse, with news of another murder only 8 days later on August 29th. At dusk, Garallo approached a 23-year-old woman not far from his own home, whom he knew to be, quote-unquote, lewd and lascivious, and offered her money for sex. The two left this time by the Portal de Barreras and advanced through the road to La Rioja. Garallo walked a distance behind her to prevent people from seeing them together. Sneaky, sneaky. They reunited after a while and had sex next to a bridge. Garallo offered her 2 reals, and after she protested, 3 and then 4. He just won't go to 5. What the fuck is that about? She kept demanding more, and he brought her down and strangled her until he thought she was dead. The victim, however, made a slight movement. Garallo then took her hairpin, straightened it, and stabbed her in the heart while holding her body under his knees. He placed the body next to the river and went back home during the night. The police investigated a soldier destined for Vitoria. The Third Carlist War had just broken out, but he was found innocent and cleared of suspicion. The panic among the population increased, with many women refusing to go outside alone and villages becoming deserted at night. In August of 1873, again during an afternoon, Garayo took another prostitute to the Rikashikui. Again, he offered little money, probably $4 total. She protested and he attempted to strangle her. The woman could scream and alert some guards from Polvorin Viejo, the prison where Garayo would be executed later, forcing him to flee. In June 1874, just about a year later, Garayo happened upon an old, sickly beggar woman on the road of La Zumaquera. Without saying a word, Garayo attempted to strangle her, but she screamed and defended herself until two other women arrived and Garayo ran away. The victims identified Garayo and said that he was drunk and had tried to kill her for no reason, but nobody informed the police. Old people. These were tough ones, but I don't know. Their social cachet, it's always kind of been the same, which is unfortunate. Diaz de Garayo would not act for 4 years after the second unsuccessful attempt. It was believed at the time of his execution, however, that his murders had inspired others to commit crimes in the Basque region. On January 2nd, 1878, 6 years after the last successful murder, a 55-year-old woman was killed on the way back from Arechavaleta, nailed it, where she had gone to buy wine. The murder was far more gruesome than any of the ones committed by Garayo. The victim was stabbed repeatedly in the chest and belly, disemboweled, and her right hand was severed. On February 28th, in the very same Vitoria, a 75-year-old man knocked on a house's door, and when an 11-year-old girl opened it, he seized, raped, and stabbed her several times in the belly with a razor before abandoning the weapon and fleeing. The girl was hospitalized and identified her aggressor 3 times before dying on March the 3rd. The man recognized the razor found as his own, but denied having done the crime. He was found guilty of the last crime, but there was no evidence to link him to the others, and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which the Supreme Court of Spain overturned and changed to the death penalty. He was garroted in Vitoria on May 19th, 1880. That means choked to fucking death with a with a piano wire or some similar apparatus. Right around that time, another woman was murdered in the countryside around Vitoria. The prime suspect was a shepherd seen in the city shortly before who could not be found nor apprehended. Now, when Garayo finally got into his second spree, these people that were doing these quote-unquote copycat crimes or similar crimes probably took a lot of the fucking heat off of him. But when he got into his second spree, on November 1st, 1878, Garayo visited a mill outside Vitoria that he had previously found the female miller cooking alone. After some words, he tried to strangle her, but Garayo, who was 57 at the time, was overpowered by the woman and forced to flee. She denounced him, and Garayo was arrested and sentenced to 2 months in prison. That's it. On August 25th, 1879, Garayo left Vitoria through the road to Castile. Between the villages of Gomecha and Ariñez, he found an old beggar woman and offered her alms. He then pushed her off the road. She fell backwards and hit her head on a rock. However, when Garayo jumped over her, she kicked him in the belly and he fell backwards. The woman got up and ran to Vitoria, screaming. Garayo followed her from a distance, and arriving in Vitoria, he asked his fourth wife to speak with the woman and reach an agreement that would keep him out of jail. The victim wanted to denounce him, but eventually agreed not to in exchange for 20 pesetas, or 80 reals. Until the woman was convinced, Garayo cautiously left the city and looked for work in the Somarastro mines in Biscay. On the way back to Vitoria, on September 7th, he latched to a 25-year-old woman from Zaitagui named Maria Dolores Cortazar, who had worked as a maid in Vitoria, and began to converse with her. Once he was sure that no one else was around, a mail service employee had passed them and seen them talking together, however, he pushed her off the road, took her handkerchief, and tied it to her neck, asking for sex and promising discretion and money in return. As the victim kept resisting, he threatened her and finally stabbed her multiple times in the chest with a razor. He indecently assaulted her and then stabbed her in the belly again until she died. Garayo hid the body in the food basket that the victim had been transporting. But rather than continuing to Vitoria, he took a detour through the mountains where he was seen by a farmer looking for a cow, drank in a road inn called Venta del Grillo, and slept under a bridge on the Zadora River in the vicinity of Arriaga. He woke up at dawn and had breakfast at an inn of Arriaga, but once again, instead of continuing back to Vitoria, he returned to the bridge, left the road, and climbed the hill of Araca. There he happened upon a 52-year-old farmer woman from Navarrete, Manuela Aracana, who had come to Vitoria for the festival and was going back home with some food she had bought. The two conversed until it began to rain and sought refuge beneath a tree. Garayo, who had claimed at first to be looking for a lost mare, confessed his true intentions and the woman attempted to flee, but he seized her and strangled her with her own apron. He took off all her clothes, but found himself unable to perform. As the woman was still breathing, he stabbed her in the heart and the belly with the same razor used in the previous crime, then cut the belly open and extracted the intestines and a kidney. Boy, he is really escalating things. He cleaned out the blood on his hands with the victim's clothing, covered the body, ate the food in her basket, what a fucking asshole, and slept again under the same bridge. It's one thing to violently, viciously kill this woman, but to just fucking eat all of her food afterwards, I don't know, that's just completely dehumanizing beyond his vicious crimes. In the morning, he threw the razor in the river and cleaned himself before returning back to Vitoria at last, changing clothes and leaving almost immediately for Alegria. The two bodies were later discovered that day. The investigation of this last double murder was conducted by Judge Jose Antonio de Parada and involved police agents in Vitoria and Guardia Civil in the nearby region. The Guardia Civil commander at Moguia headed the testimony of the mail service employee who had seen the first victim walking with a man and interrogated the inn patrons and farmers of the region who claimed to have seen a stranger with the same aspect around that time. This description was sent back to Vitoria, where the alguacil Pio Fernandez de Pinedo linked it to Garayo and his recent arrest for the attack on the Miller woman. Pinedo also learned of the unsuccessful attack in August from the victim and shared his suspicions with Parada, who formalized the case against Juan Diaz de Garayo. Pinedo took the arrest order to Garayo's home, where Garayo's wife said that he had left after the incident with the old woman and she had not seen him since, but in reality, she had seen him briefly when he came to change clothes on September 9th. She said she did not know of his current whereabouts or the reason he had hurt the other women. Garayo was at this time serving in the house of a farmer in Alegria, where news of the last crimes arrived shortly after Garayo did so himself. The farmer's daughter, a young child, reportedly told her father that the new servant was, quote-unquote, so ugly he looked like the Sacamanticus. Arrest, trial, and conviction soon followed. Garayo returned unexpectedly to Vitoria on 21st of September and was arrested and taken to the local jail after being recognized on the street by Pinedo. There he was interrogated by Parada, but Garayo denied everything. He remained in jail for 12 days, this time being interrogated by Warden Jose Fresco and keyholder Juan Jimenez, and only admitted guilt and began to describe the crimes after they appealed to his religious beliefs and convinced him that it was the only way to obtain divine mercy. Because if he gave so much of a shit about these beliefs, he wouldn't have done all this fucking bullshit in the first place. Anyways, he started with the murder of the Zaitagui woman, which was transcribed by Jimenez, and later described the Araca murders to Jimenez and Fresco. On October 3rd, he agreed to repeat this testimony before the judge and his notaries, and he did so from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., adding further details. The next day, he confessed to the 4 other murders and 4 attempts to Fresco and Jimenez. On November 11th, Parada sentenced Garayo to 2 death penalties and to give economic compensation, though only for the last 2 murders. Garayo remained calm when he received the sentence and asked lawyers Manuel Lete and Juan Echevarria to sign the sentences in his name as he was illiterate. Shocker. He then asked Jimenez for a stew, as he had not eaten meat that day, to which he conceded. From his conviction, Garayo wore shackles on his feet and was denied a shaving razor. Good call. He managed to shave himself with a lighted match at least once, but grew his beard afterwards. Garayo also learned to read in the jail's library. Hey, read this. You're gonna fucking die. Of capital punishment. Garayo's defense appealed the conviction to the Audiencia of Burgos, arguing insanity on the part of the defendant. And this ordered the court of Vitoria to have Garayo's mental state evaluated by as many doctors as possible, as well as to interrogate all of his friends and relatives on this matter. Vitoria doctors, 11 total, were consulted, who determined on a report dated March 3rd, 1880, that Garayo was not insane and had committed the crimes consciously. The defense asked for a second report, this time to the directors of the mental hospitals in Madrid and Toledo, who on May 24th found Garayo to be a quote-unquote imbecile. Sounds reasonable. And to have committed the crimes under the influence of quote-unquote a partial madness or quote-unquote intermittent monomania amidst long intervals of lucidity, unquote. However, the Supreme Court disregarded the appeal and maintained the execution sentence. Garayo was garroted. Garayo was garroted. Garayo was garroted at the Polvora Viejo prison of Vitoria on May 11th, 1881, by executioner Lorenzo Huertas. Thanks, Renzo, who came from Burgos. After his death, Garayo's body was exposed publicly for 10 hours and buried in an unmarked grave in Santa Isabel Cemetery, but the head is believed to have been separated during the autopsy, sold to a medical collection in Madrid, and eventually lost. I wonder if anybody who viewed the body partook of his flowing blood, his sanguino, to cure what ailed them. Isn't that ironic? Don't you think? Anywho, in Spanish folklore, the Sacamanticas, Spanish for fat extractor, is a bogeyman type character, or booger man, if you will, often conflated with the child targeting sack man that abducts people to extract their body fat and sell it. Juan Diaz de Garayo was called the Sacamanticas upon his arrest and conviction, and today is sometimes referred to as quote-unquote the real Sacamanticas. But he wasn't the origin of this legendary character, as it predates him, nor did he ever extract the body fat of his victims. The idea the murders were the work of a Sacamanticas were actually a popular rumor that began prior to Garayo's arrest, when there was no known culprit. Garayo himself heard of this rumor, and his disembowelment of the last victim was a deliberate attempt to promote it. Once again proving that any fairly canny or clever serial killer can utilize the folklore and mythology or occultism, quote-unquote, or Satanism, quote-unquote, to throw off the scent, which I believe is probably most times, if it's not stupid-ass teenagers who are playing, I don't know, fucking D&D fucking Satanism, getting into violent crimes and occultism, then this is probably what it is. I would say the 3 children who died in the West Memphis 3 case, I don't think the guy who killed those kids was smart enough to deliberately do this, but this was nonetheless the outcome that took place. I don't know. The guy who probably did it seems like a real fucking moron. But that's just me. That's just me saying my own editorial bits and pieces. So, yeah, Garayo, he took advantage of these rumors going around. The Sacamanticas were always wandering traders, always outsiders, while Garayo was a local farmer. In those attempts to confirm the Sacamanticas rumor, Garayo tried to throw suspicion off himself and the real reason for the murders, his icky, sticky sexual impulses. I love that Norm Macdonald quote, even in today's enlightened society, did you know there's still a stigma against being a psychosexual sadist? Oh boy. Mr. Norm. Though only Garayo came to be known as the Sacamanticus. Other serial killers and child murderers in 19th and early 20th century Spain were claimed to be Sacamanticus as well, such as the aforementioned Manuel Blanco Romasanta, Enriqueta Martí y Ripolles, who I will also probably cover in a future episode. And then there's the, I'm going to say, the jewel in the crown of this episode is the 1910 murders of the Sierra de Gador, which does in fact fit perfectly into our overall theme of medicinal cannibalism. This is probably one of, if not the, prime examples of when misinterpretation of folklore and quote-unquote occultism goes very, very wrong. This is what's known as the crime of Gador. The crime of Gador is the name given to the kidnapping and subsequent murder of 7-year-old Bernardo Gonzalez Parra, which took place on June 28, 1910 in Gador, Almeria, Spain. The purpose of the crime was to use the child's blood and body fat as a folk cure for a wealthy patron's tuberculosis. At the time, it was believed that drinking the blood of a human child and using their body fat as a cataplasm, or salve, if you will, a bomb. Who told you to put the bomb on? Who told you to put the bomb on? Was a remedy for tuberculosis. Francisco Ortega el Moruno, a.k.a. the Moor, oof, I don't think you can get away with that nickname anymore these days, had recently been diagnosed with tuberculosis and was desperately seeking a cure. He visited the local curandera, Agustina Rodriguez, who in turn sent for the barber healer, Francisco Leona. Yes, barber healers. These were a thing that were quite prevalent back in the day. Not just in Spain, had them in America. They were pretty much all over the fucking place. Leona, who had also had a criminal record, agreed to cure Ortega in exchange for 3,000 reals. Leona and Julio El Tonto, a.k.a. the Fool Hernandez, Augustina's son, offered to find a child. On the evening of June 27, 1910, Francisco Leona kidnapped Bernardo Gonzalez Parra, a 7-year-old from Rioja, drugged him with chloroform, and put him in a sack. Just like the story. A brother of Julio Tonto the Fool Hernandez, Jose Hernandez, was to advise the client Ortega, leaving his wife Elena to make dinner. When Julio Hernandez El Tonto distracted him, Leona covered Bernardo's mouth with a handkerchief bathed in chloroform. After that, both of them introduced the infant, or, well, it says infant, but 7-year-old, to a gunny sack to move him to a cortijo, which I believe is like a barn of some sort. Leona lay Bernardo down on a table, and held by the others, he stabbed him in the armpit, while Agustina Rodriguez picked up the blood with a cooking pot and gave it to Francisco Ortega. Ortega mixed the blood with sugar and drank it. After that, they took the boy to a place known as Las Posicas, where Leona killed him, crushing his skull with a rock. Then he extracted fat and mesentery to make a compress to apply to Ortega's chest. Mesentery. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it sounds very disgusting. Let's find out real quick. Mesentery. Sounds like messy dysentery. But is it messy dysentery? Phone to find thing now, go. The mesentery is a fold of membrane that attaches the intestine to the wall around the stomach area and holds it in place. So yes, fucking gross gut stuff. Yum, yum, yum. To finish the ritual, Bernardo's body was concealed in a crevice, unburied but covered with herbs and stones, located in Las Posicas. When distributing the actual 3,000 reals Ortega paid him for his services, Leona didn't share it out equally, so Julio Hernandez resorted to authorities and declared the crime. My God, this is the stupidest fucking reason for anyone to get caught doing anything. Really, in actuality, they probably should have realized the minute that they had someone join their little team of criminal masterminds who was called the Fool. The Fool was his nickname. Shit wasn't going to go well. Realizing Leona's intentions, Hernandez told the civil guards who had seen the body of the child while he was chasing partridges. When law enforcement officers arrived, the people of Gador turned Leona over to them, as he was known for his illegal and occult practices. During court proceedings, Leona indicted El Tonto Hernandez in his testimony, who in turn did the same to Leona. Finally, after multiple excuses, both confessed to the crime. Most of the perpetrators were executed by hanging. I wonder if anyone collected their hanging ghosts while they were hanging. Leona was sentenced to death by garrote, but died in prison. The client, Ortega, and Augustina, the curandera, were both sentenced to death. Jose Hernandez was sentenced to 17 years in prison, while his wife, Elena, was acquitted. Julio El Tonto was sentenced to death too, but received a pardon on grounds of insanity following a psychiatric report.
Medical imbecility.
This crime gave rise to the terms hombre del saco and sacamanticus because the kidnappers used a gunny sack to carry the child. It was defined as quote-unquote medical crime, inspired by folk beliefs about the medicinal properties of human blood and children's fat. Now, while you may be thinking to yourself, this is the best podcast in the world, I'm going to tell everyone I know to listen, like, and subscribe, there's probably another part of your brain that's thinking, yikes, I sure am glad all of this Sacamanticus shenanigans was so very long ago. Boy, howdy, I sure as heck am, by golly. To which I must reply, first, kudos to you for not cursing so much throughout your inner stream of conscious monologue. Second, not so fast. For you see, just as recently as 2009, there was suspected Pishtaco gang activity in Peru. You may remember how earlier on the episode I had mentioned the South American equivalent of the Sacamanticus folklore figure, often referred to as the Pishtaco. Well, dig this action, Jackson. Reports about alleged Pishtaco cases in Peru gained significant attention in 2009, with news outlets reporting the arrest of a gang accused of killing dozens of people to sell their fat to European cosmetics companies. Here is where we can see something of a murky overlap that includes elements of both medicinal cannibalism, intersecting with the realm of cosmetics, as previously mentioned concerning Sandra Bullock on The Ellen Show.
It's foreskin from a Korean baby.
There's a clip. Look it up. It's true. Police in Peru arrested a group of individuals they dubbed the Pishtacos, based on the Andean folklore of a figure who steals human fat. Authorities claimed the gang killed as many as 60 people in the Huánuco region to extract and sell their body fat for profit, reportedly for $15,000 a liter. The harvested fat was allegedly intended for the European cosmetics market. However, the story faced skepticism from medical experts and some within the police force who questioned the feasibility of an international black market for human fat, according to Time magazine and The Guardian. The claims also raised concerns about potential government cover-ups or distractions from other issues, such as state-sanctioned violence or drug cartel activities. More recently, there have been documented cases of human trafficking and organ harvesting in Peru, though not directly linked to the traditional Pishtaco narrative of fat stealing for cosmetics. In November 2022, a case emerged involving a Mexican woman who traveled to Peru to meet an online boyfriend and was subsequently killed, allegedly for her organs. Peruvian authorities arrested the man, a medical student, on charges of human organ trafficking. This incident sparked concerns about the growing problem of human organ trafficking, highlighting its tragic consequences for vulnerable individuals. The red market. It's important to differentiate between the legendary Pishtaco figure and the serious issue of human trafficking and organ harvesting, which unfortunately occurs in Peru and other parts of the world. The 2009 Pishtaco gang allegations were highly publicized, but ultimately questioned for their veracity and potential underlying motives. Also, thinking back on what we've learned of traditional Chinese medicine, one may be tempted to try and reframe the whole Communist Chinese Party, one may be tempted to try and reframe the whole Chinese Communist Party versus Falun Gong situation, along with all the horror stories involving, some might say, fairly reasonable claims of various human rights violations that the CCP has been said to have frequently committed against Falun Gong members. And while that may be, indeed, a somewhat tempting recontextualization of such atrocities, I would be remiss if I did not mention that illegal black market organ harvesting in China, in general, is a far more complex can of worms to get into in this episode, though it obviously very much falls into the realm of not cool. And B, while I'm sure that the vast majority of Falun Gong practitioners are probably normal, decent people, their spiritual leader and the creator of Falun Gong, Master Li Hongzhi, is definitely no saint in his own right, and has espoused some pretty virulent, hateful shit mixed up within his theology, for lack of a better term. So sometimes there are no cut and dry good guys. In fact, quite very fucking often, there are no cut and dry good guys. Except maybe for most of those people practicing Tai Chi early morning out in the park. They seem pretty laid back. But anyways, I really hope none of you guys were eating during this episode. Bone Ape Tit. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Should everything go right. My name is Mike Luck. This is the Kooks, Pranks, and Iconoclast podcast. Thanks for listening. Love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll see you next time. Peace.
It's foreskin from a Korean baby.